competency, the social workers and officers.
Hello. All right, if everybody wants to find the way to their seat, we're going to get going. All right, I'm going to call to order the meeting of the Nevada Board of Wildlife Commissioners today on Friday, March 10th, 2023. And I'm going to ask Commissioner Booth to lead us in the pledge. Thank you. I'll ask the department to take the roll.
Chairman Cavilla.
Here.
Vice Chairman Rogers.
Here.
Commissioner Barnes. Commissioner Booth. Here. Commissioner East. Commissioner Keel.
Here.
Commissioner McNinch.
Here.
Commissioner Walther. Commissioner Wise.
Here.
Yeah, and Commissioner East, Walter, and Barnes all are notified me that they would be absent today. Commissioner East will be here tomorrow. So will the county advisory board members in attendance please announce themselves? Any cabs? I believe that's only cab in person. Any cabs on Zoom?
This is Joe Crawford with the Lion Cab.
Craig Burnside, Douglas.
Go ahead, Glenn. Introduce
Joe
yourself.
Crawford with the Lion Cab.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral.
All right. With that, we'll go to agenda item number 2, approval of the agenda for possible action. The commission will review the agenda and may take action to approve the agenda. The commission may remove items from the agenda, continue items for consideration, or take items out of order. And I do have one request, just to shift some items around. Item number 6C and 6E are both related to one another, so I'd ask that we'll take agenda item 6D ahead of 6C. I think logically just makes more sense, so they're together. Any additional questions or comments on the agenda? All right. Seeing none, I'll take it out for cab comment. Any cab comment on the agenda? Any cab comment on Zoom on the agenda? None. Okay, any public comment on the agenda?
For the record, Alan Janae, Director. I just wanted to make a note on item 10 that it does have a note at the very last sentence says meeting will reconvene at the close of the field tour. That will not be the case.
Okay.
The meeting will end at the end of the field tour.
Noted.
Thank you.
Okay. Any public comment on Zoom on the agenda? All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda as presented, except that items 6C and 6D be at the call of the chair, and with the noted on item 10 that we will not reconvene. It'll be the end of our day.
Second?
Okay, I've got a motion by Commissioner McNinch, second by Vice Chair Rogers. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, agenda item number 3, approval of the minutes for possible action. Commission minutes may be approved from the January 27th and 28th, 2023 meeting. Any comments on the minutes?
I'd like to make note that I was present at that meeting, page 1.
Any additional comments on the agenda? Or the minutes, I'm sorry. I had one minor one. I gotta find it here real quick. I forgot to put a tab in there. This is my bad here. I'm sorry about that. Oh, just on page 36, it would be, when we begin talking about the sheep hunts, it said, the first sentence, it's the 4th paragraph down, Chairman Cavalier stated a concern that if we have dry water year, the hunt would be too easy as the sheep will gather at Lake Mead for water. I think we need to just go back and look at that. I was specifically talking to the Mormons in that spot, not Lake Mead. That was my only comment on the minutes. I would just ask we go back and review that part of it, the video. That was my only. Any other commission comments on the minutes? Seeing none, any cab comments on the minutes? Any cab comments on Zoom? Any public comment on the minutes? Public comment on Zoom? Okay, seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission. Vice Chair Rogers.
Yes, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion for approval of the minutes from the January 27 and 28, 2023 meetings with the 2 noted changes. One, the presence of Mr. Booth at that meeting, and then the second noted item of going back and checking the record and making sure that that it was noted about the Mormon Mountains rather than Lake Mead.
Take a second. Okay. I got a motion by Vice Chair Rogers, second by Commissioner McNinch to approve the minutes with the noted changes. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 4, members' items, announcements, and correspondence, informational. Commissioners may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. The commission will review and may discuss correspondence sent or received by the commission since the last regular meeting and may provide copies for the exhibit file. Commissioners may provide hard copies of their correspondence for the written record. Correspondence sent or received by Secretary Alan Janae may also be discussed. And I guess just since the last meeting, I did receive some correspondence. One was from the Nevada Farm Bureau regarding the Nevada Sagebrush Habitat Plan. I know the department has that. I think all the commissioners, we received an email from a sportsman regarding an issue with a sportsman and a guiding outfit up in Humboldt County. I know the department has seen that as well. And then I also received in the mail, and I got it, I don't know if all the other commissioners did, regarding the water power project. I should have wrote down the formal name of it in White Pine County in Ely. Yeah, the hydro project in Ely, I received, they're going in for their formal approval from, I think, the Department of Energy, if I remember right, but, I'll make sure I get a copy of that to the department. That's kind of all I had. Commissioner McNinch?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I had the Farm Bureau in the situation. We received the email from the gentleman up in northern Nevada with his run-in, and I when I read it, I was pretty frustrated for him that there would be a situation like that occurred, and I think I had intended to read his letter into the record, but I think just noting it and having it in there and considering that the department's looking into it, I think is proper for now. But we just seem to be having a little bump in incidents here, at least ones that are becoming more known and more discussed. And I think at some point as a commission, we're probably going to have to find a way to talk about it and see what's going on and find out how we can put some boundaries on some things. I mean, if this actually panned out, that's crazy. Thank you.
Any additional member items, announcements, or correspondence? Oh, Mr. Janay.
Yes, thank you. For the record, Alan Janae, we did receive, and I'm sure it'll probably be mentioned in item 8A, we did receive a letter on the falconry regs from North American Falconers Association and the International Eagle Association, I'll say it that way. Thank you.
And we did get that too. And then we did, specific to the regulation for tomorrow, I think the Canvas Black Duck Club too sent in the correspondence regarding that regulation, but anything else? All right. With that, we will go to agenda item number 5, County Advisory Boards to manage wildlife member items, informational. County Advisory Board members may present emergent items. No action may be taken by the commission. Any item requiring commission action will be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Any cab items in Vegas? Nothing. Okay. Any cab items on Zoom? Nope. Okay. With that, we'll go to agenda item number 6, reports informational. 6A, department activity report. Secretary Alan Janae and Division Administrators, a report will be provided on Nevada Department of Wildlife activities.
Thank you. For the record, Alan Janae, Director. We'll take turns going through the department activity report. In the Director's office, as many are aware, Mike Scott has been appointed the Deputy Director of Resource Management after serving as the Game Division Administrator and working for the department for over 30 years. The Director's office is excited to have Mike's experience and leadership as part of our team. We're now fully staffed and looking forward to the guiding the department on conservation issues. We are fully staffed, at least in the Director's office, but we're still working to backfill our administrative positions, so we're working on that. The Director's office has been busy since the start of the legislative session. The department's budget was presented to the Legislative Commission's Budget Subcommittee on February 1. The presentation went very well and there were a few questions asked. The Director's office has met or has had meet and greets with a number of legislators to introduce myself and the new deputy directors, as well as share the department's priorities. Those legislators include Senators Scheibel, Pazina, and Assembly members Cohen and Watts. The department presented to the Assembly Committee on Natural Resources on Wednesday, February 15th, and again, that presentation went extremely well. There were a few questions on habitat and Operation Game Thief, which the department has provided responses to. The legislative breakfast was held on Friday, February 17th, and went extremely well. We would like to thank all who attended, especially NBU, the Coalition for Nevada's Wildlife, and the Nevada Wildlife Federation for their sponsorship of the event. The department will keep the commission apprised of any future legislative activity. And with that, I'd like to pass to the Game Division for their update.
morning. Russell Wilson here from the Game Division. Staff specialist attended the 2023 Western Hunting and Conservation Expo in Salt Lake City, Utah. The 2023 Nevada Heritage statewide mule deer tag sold for $160,000 at the Friday night auction. Capture plans were coordinated with regional field offices for mule deer captures in Elko, Pershing, and Washoe counties during February. About 60 mule deer were targeted for this capture event. Eastern Region biologists classified 53 moose during this winter's elk surveys in management areas 6 and 7, including a day spent specifically searching for moose in Unit 061. In total, 21 bulls, 21 cows, and 11 calves have been observed during aerial surveys so far in 2023. Nevada's moose population remains strong and continues to increase in both number and distribution. Capture plans are being prepared to capture about 15 adult female antelope in Lander County in cooperation with Nevada Gold Mines. A new GPS solar ear tag will be deployed on 5 antelope to test new and emerging technology in GPS tracking devices for wildlife. The inception season of the one-horned ram hunt has been a success thus far. To date, 5 rams have been checked into the Las Vegas office. 4 of the 5 rams have been 11 or 12-year-olds and represented the objective of the management ram hunt. Game Division field biologists in the Western region have been actively trapping California quail from urbanized settings for translocation to wildlands, including the new Licking Ranch Wildlife Management Area near Battle Mountain. Detailed information about the total number of birds moved will be available next month. Eastern and Western Region Game Division personnel, along with several volunteers, successfully captured a total of 40 turkeys from northeastern Nevada for translocation on the western side of the state. The turkeys have been causing depredation issues on private land, and the translocation should help reduce some of the conflicts in the area. Staff have been coordinating with Colorado Parks and Wildlife about the potential to obtain Columbian sharp-tailed grouse and augment the existing population in northeastern Nevada. We hope to capture and move birds during this coming April. NDOW staff attended the post-hunt meeting with the Department of Defense for the hunt on the Nevada Test and Training Range for a post-hunt briefing. The Fish and Wildlife Service the department was briefed about multiple violations of the DULA, the depredation on the depleted uranium sites, and removing a deadhead from the refuge during the hunt. Several lifetime bans are being pursued. The group discussed the possibility of discontinuing the NTTR hunt and made multiple suggestions for measures to mitigate future violations if the hunt is continued. Ultimately, the Department of Defense agreed to proceed with the hunt. New changes that will be implemented include hunt parties will now be restricted to 5, as many individuals can attend the briefing that hunter thinks is necessary, but only 4 plus the hunter are allowed on the range at any given time. And there will be 1 access point at Point Bravo. The White Sage Gap access will also be restricted to through traffic. Interviews for the Panaca and Eureka Resource Area game biologist positions were held on January 25th and 26th. Matthew Shanks was selected for the Panaca position, and Joshua Kirk was selected to fill the Eureka Resource Area position. The Game Division is very excited to have these 2 new biologists in place. I'd also like to mention that recently the Wayne Lathrop and James Capurro internship committee met last week and made a selection on 2 new wildlife interns for the department. The department has historically had 4 Lathrop interns and 1 Capurro intern during the interviews, which is a great thing to be a participant in because it really brings a lot of light to the future generations of wildlife and brings a lot of hope to what the future holds. But there was only one open position, and the committee felt like there was two candidates that would be very strong candidates. And so during discussion and then subsequently a meeting with the NBU board, NBU added a sixth position, a fifth Lathrop position to that. So there'll be now 6 interns in that program. So Chloe Crookshanks was selected to be an intern, daughter of our own Chris Crookshanks. His son, Cade, is already in the program. And also Haley Latin from Virginia City was selected for the other position. Thank you.
Commissioner McNinch.
Russell, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't talk about the Lathrop Capurro Scholarship Program very often. This isn't the first time NBU's kicked up their scholarships or their help to the program. It's a big deal, and do you mind just giving a real quick overview of it, just to explain what it is and how the kids rotate and stuff like that? Because it's not a small deal for sure.
Yeah, it's a great program. So these interns, students that are going into a wildlife or wildlife-related field can apply coming out of their senior year of high school. If selected, they can receive up to 4 years of summer employment with the department as a conservation aide, working with the game division throughout the state. College students are also eligible to apply for this, and we do have Haley Latin that we just are hiring for this coming season, is coming out of with an associate's degree out of Casper College, where she's been playing volleyball and transferring to UNR this fall. So she'll be eligible for 2 years. They're eligible up until the point of graduation, but it's been a great program. There's a number of department employees that came through this program. A pretty long list, and I won't remember names. So I don't want to forget any of them and shortchange them. But it's a great program. They come through. They get the opportunity to work largely with the game division. They're involved in surveys. They're involved in telemetry, finding mortality signals coming from our various radio callers. They're involved sometimes with surveys. A couple of years ago, with the graciousness of the 2 funding agencies or NGOs, NBU and the Nevada Record Book, we've extended their hiring length so that we can keep them on during the school year for special projects. And so the last few years they've been going out and assisting the department with our CWD check stations throughout the state during the deer hunt. They've been involved in some of the midwinter captures, and they've also been involved in some survey efforts, getting a chance to go up in the helicopter and assist in that process. So it's a great program, and like I said, a number of them are recruiting straight out of the program into full-time, including Josh Kirk was one of the names that just received the Eureka biologist position, and recently came out of that program. So it's a great program.
Thank you.
Good morning. Is this on? All right. My name is Mark Fries. I'm a Habitat Staff Specialist here to give you a Habitat Division update. In our technical review program, the Greenlink North Transmission Line Wildlife Working Group began meeting in February to discuss data needs and wildlife concerns. Most concerns orient around impacts to greater sage-grouse and big game, as well as raptors. The department began working with the Bureau of Land Management on potential for modifying sage-grouse habitat management categories for the BLM sage-grouse plan revision, and provided comments on the BLM solar EIS effort that will revise the establishment of solar energy zones, add 5 states to the plan, and evaluate solar variant zones. The Energy Review Program under technical review has received a total of 9 energy project applications since the first of the year, including 4 solar projects, 4 transmission projects, and 1 fossil fuel project. In the Habitat Conservation Framework world, since the Commission last met in December, or since the last Commission meeting, The department and Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team hosted a local work group meeting on the Sagebrush Habitat Plan in Las Vegas on January 31st and presented to Nevada Cattlemen's February 17th. The focus of these meetings was to receive public input on the mapping products and tools that will be used to help prioritize sagebrush habitat in future conservation efforts. Additionally, the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team will use portions of the Sagebrush Habitat Plan to update their strategic action plan. For the Sagebrush Ecosystem Technical Team, the SET is working with Dr. Pete Coates' lab to update habitat quantification tool to include space use index using greater sage-grouse location data from across Nevada. The inclusion of greater sage-grouse space use location data around lekking and breeding habitat within the HQT will result in a more thorough analysis of impacts from surface occupancy projects and could achieve increased conservation for greater sage-grouse, particularly where it's needed around leks and their respective clusters. In our fire and rehabilitation and restoration program, in 2022, the fire season burned approximately 59,228 acres, which is significantly below the 20-year average of 452,000 acres. We thank Nevada's land management agencies and fire suppression personnel for their fire containment efforts. Given the low number of acres consumed by fire this year, NDOW and partners were able to rehabilitate and restore many of this year's burned acres, as well as past burns that have remained in a degraded state. NDOW biologists implemented 20,296 acres of herbicide treatment and 34,752 acres of aerial seeding for a total of 55,048 acres of treatment across 19 projects. The cost of these treatments is nearly $1.4 million. We'd like to thank our partners that provided financial support to make these rehabilitation and restoration actions happen, which include Bureau of Land Management, the Dream Tag Program, and NGOs such as Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, Nevada Muleys, Nevada Chucker Foundation, and Muley Fanatics. Since 2017, NDOW biologists have implemented 560,278 acres of treatment at a cost of $11.4 million. We thank our habitat biologists for their significant efforts and contributions addressing invasive species and wildfire threats through rehabilitating and restoring Nevada's wildlife habitat. For our water development program, the Southern Region Water Development Crew recently finished up annual maintenance flights and, as expected, found very good water supply conditions across nearly all guzzlers. After several years of poor water quality or low supply, guzzlers in the Southern Region, this change is welcome. Most guzzlers were at or near capacity. The Southern crew also finished the Tommy Guzzler project on the Desert National Wildlife Refuge. The Northern crew has finalized their volunteer build schedule, which includes installing 5 guzzler units in the Trinity, Nightingale, and Fairview ranges in Calico and Butte Mountains. Additionally, a spring and meadow fence project will be installed in the Desitoya Mountains. The volunteer build season will begin March 11th in the Trinity Range and finish the season June 17th with the guzzler build in the Butte Mountains and the meadow fence in the Desitoya Mountains. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Keel.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I hate to even bring this up, but we had very low fires last year, but with the precipitation going into this year, the fuel load has got to be tremendous probably at this upcoming fire season. Are we thinking ahead and like where are we at with green stripping, and apologize for that, some of those other initiatives that can hopefully curb some of the massive fire seasons that we've seen in 2017, 2018?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Mark Fries, for the record. We do coordinate with Bureau of Land Management, Forest Service, other partners, and we are looking into helping them if they have any needs. They've largely got a handle on it. They are expecting that it's going to be a big fire year. One thing we as the department are doing are kind of pre-positioning resources, so we're going to a spring seed buy to buy a bunch of our seed, as well as chemical purchases. So we've got those seeds and chemical on hand, and we could quickly respond following a wildfire.
Yep. Appreciate that, thank you, yeah. I mean, being proactive and thinking ahead is certainly appreciated.
Thank you.
Good morning. Chris Vasey, Conservation Education Chief for the record. We'll start off with our events. I reported on this last commission meeting, but didn't have some of the totals on the numbers. Our annual National Archery in the Schools program tournaments were a huge success this year. We had a total of 651 youth archers to complete these tournaments. We had 66 archers at their Western Region tournament that was held in the Wasting Arrows on January 19th and 20th. We had 108 archers shoot remotely and a total of 477 archers at the Southern Region shoot, which was hosted in the South Point Hotel and Casino on February 1st. Over 600 participants, so it's a really good, successful program, and we got it in every school, just about, working on Washoe County right now. Preparations are underway for the NDOW exhibit at 2023 Clark County Fair and Rodeo. In 2022, this event saw a record attendance estimated at nearly 109,000 people. We have a great showing there. It's a great display. If you have a chance to make it, it's something to be seen. And a lot of our staff are there representing every division. So those preparations are on way, be in April. Conservation Education staff and Elko hosted Elko Sportsman Expo on March 4th and 5th. This event featured 2 days of outdoor-related activities and booths and presented by Nevada Department of Wildlife, the Elko chapter of National Wild Turkey Federation. The event hosted a total of 36 vendors and was sponsored by Gateway RV, Fifth Gear Power Sports, Riverton Stocksman, Exit Outdoors. Education activities for the kids and families were a hit, and we had over 5,000 attending. Conservation Education staff hosted a table at the Legislative Building on February 13th as part of Tourism Day at the legislature, sharing information on various ways the department supports tourism in Nevada. This was a huge success. We also, shortly after that, attended the Wild Harvest Breakfast on February 17th and provided legislators and their staff with opportunities to talk to NDOW employees. Excuse me while I get this ready. On the volunteer front, as spring arrives, many volunteer projects have been rolling out, including guzzler builds in the Southern Region, wood duck nest box monitoring in the Western Region. Sage grouse select volunteers have been trained and will be deployed throughout the Northern Nevada until mid-May. On the outreach front, Conservation Education staff sent NDOW's first game application promotional email for big game tag application period to almost 50,000 people, encouraging them to get their friends and family signed up for hunter education classes and our big game seminars. Conservation Education staff also has planned a variety of promotions for later this month, including a postcard, which you'll be seeing shortly, more emails, campaigns, text messages, website content, news segments, and social media posts to promote the big game tag application period and to provide hunters with useful resources. Staff has planned a Women's Month social media. If you're following us now, you'll see some of these media campaigns for the month of March. Content will include Instagram takeovers, podcasts, women's history posts, and more highlighted the contributions women have made for conservation and the outdoors. Conservation Education staff recognized National Invasive Species Awareness Week with a series of social media posts raising awareness of different invasive species in Nevada and what can be done to stop the spread. The post received a lot of engagement from NDOW's social media audiences. Media highlights: NDOW has officially launched a new external newsletter, The Wild Side, which hopefully many of you got, which is designed to help keep our partners and public informed on our agency updates, action items from the Nevada Department of Wildlife Commission. The newsletter is slated to be released each week following the 7 annual commission meetings. NDOW will help a media event at this Sparks Marina stocking for this year. It'll be next week. I think it's Wednesday. Staff also posted social media content with the goal of promoting fish stocking season, easy access to fishing, urban ponds throughout the state. Over the last 30 days, NDOW has been mentioned 600 times in the news through paper, broadcast stories, various topics. These topics include coyote awareness, invasive species, the impacts of feeding wildlife, habitat improvement projects, and agencies and updates and more. And that concludes. What? Anybody have any questions?
Commissioner Wise?
I just want to say I did receive that newsletter, and it was really enjoyable. I really liked the layout. It was really easy to share with some of my staff, and so it was really nice to show them what we were doing here.
Excellent. There was some good highlight video in there. We hope to have more.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning. Mark Enders, Wildlife Diversity Biologist for the record. I'll be providing updates on the Wildlife Diversity Division. Wildlife Diversity Biologists recently completed the 50th annual statewide winter raptor survey. This survey is an attempt to gather long-term data on 24 raptor species that are using habitats all across Nevada during winter, including local breeders and seasonal migrants that rely on resources in our state to survive the winter. This survey effort started in 1973 by a single non-game biologist. He surveyed 6 driving routes and covered 227 miles. Today, it's grown to involve more than 100 people, including biologists from all NDOW divisions, other state and federal agencies, and scores of volunteers that cover more than 4,500 miles across the state each January. There are currently 63 driving survey routes where surveyors attempt to locate raptors along paved or dirt roads, and 8 boat survey routes on Lake Mead and Lake Mojave. Unfortunately, 3 routes were inaccessible due to snowy conditions, and a few others could only be partially surveyed this year. Despite these challenges, more than 1,000 raptor observations were made. The most common species was the red-tailed hawk, which is pretty typical. We also had large numbers of golden eagles, bald eagles, and rough-legged hawks. And rough-legged hawks are particularly interesting because they breed in the Arctic tundra, and winter's the only time you'll find them in Nevada. Wildlife diversity biologists also participated in a national effort to monitor the spread of white nose syndrome across North America. White nose syndrome is a disease caused by a non-native fungus called PD that affects hibernating bats, and it's killed millions of them in North America since 2006. The fungus has been found in 43 states and was most recently detected in California and Idaho. Surveillance and monitoring give us the best opportunity to be prepared for its eventual arrival in Nevada. Over the past 20 years, NDOW has surveyed more than 4,000 abandoned mines and found important bat roosts in more than 1,200 of them. That important knowledge helps guide our white nose syndrome surveillance today. So last month, 11 abandoned mines across 6 Nevada counties were surveyed for evidence of white nose syndrome. Biologists used tracked ATVs and snowshoes to access these remote sites and worked in teams of 4 to ensure safety. Once underground, they found more than 800 hibernating bats and were able to sample 230 of them for white nose syndrome by rubbing cotton swabs along their exposed skin. NDOW began surveillance for white nose syndrome in 2015, and to date, no infected bats have been found, and all swab samples have come back negative for the fungus. We also have an Endangered Species Act update. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service recently announced a proposed threatened listing for the Sierra Nevada population of California spotted owls under the Endangered Species Act. This species occurs on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe and is one of the rarest wildlife species in our state. Nesting territories have been monitored by NDOW since 2015, and we plan to continue working with partners to monitor and manage this species. And finally, some upcoming projects. Wildlife diversity biologists are preparing for shorebird surveys throughout the state this spring. It'll be part of a 30-year resurvey effort across multiple states in the Intermountain West to determine how habitat conditions have changed for migrating shorebirds in that time period. Nevada has the highest number of shorebird sites in the western U.S., which surprises a lot of people. We have 56 of them, and we're partnering with local Audubon Society chapters to tackle this large multi-year effort. And we're also preparing for the Amargosa Valley BioBlitz this spring. The BLM Pahrump Field Office is hosting the event, and wildlife diversity biologists will be participating to survey for reptiles, small mammals, and bats. And with that, I'm happy to take questions.
Questions? I don't see any. Thank you.
Morning. For the record, Chris Crookshanks, Fisheries Division Administrator. Biologists continue their normal wintertime activities such as analyzing data from the previous field season and preparing required field trip reports and job progress reports. Many Fisheries Division personnel have participated in various interagency coordination, species recovery, and planning meetings, which are traditionally held in the winter when biologists are not in the field. As a matter of fact, just last week we held our annual interagency Lahontan Cutthroat Trout interagency meeting, which is our big meeting of all LCT stakeholders range-wide. We held that at the Sparks Nugget last week. Fisheries biologists throughout the state have been assisting with trout in the classroom educational activities as well. The epic winter of 2022-2023 continues. At this point, I'd like to take a second and go off the record a little bit and just say that at the last commission meeting, I may be on the record for saying something to the effect of keep it coming or bring it on. And at this point, I would like to apologize for those comments and rescind my statements. As of early March, all Nevada hydro basins were well above long-term averages, with many over 200% of normal. I looked just yesterday, and the Southern Nevada Basin, which encompasses most of Clark County and Lincoln County, was at 350% of normal. Although there's now concern for the well-being of some of our terrestrial species, water conditions in 2023 should make for happy fish. From our fish hatcheries, hatchery headquarters staff have been coordinating funding for refurbishment of cooling towers at Mason Valley Hatchery, feasible study for recirculating systems at Spring Creek Rearing Station, and a motor pump replacement at Gallagher Hatchery that will help pull water from the hatchery building. Recently, Jeff McDonald started at Gallagher Hatchery as a hatchery technician too. Jeff comes from Idaho and has worked in fisheries and hatcheries over the past 10 years. We welcome Jeff and look forward to having him on board. From our aquatic invasive species program, staff received reports from USGS in late January of Australian red claw crayfish inhabiting ponds located on the Clark County Wetlands Park on the east side of Las Vegas. An on-site visit confirmed the presence of this highly invasive and destructive species in the two uppermost ponds in the park. In coordination with the county, personnel were mobilized for a rapid eradication response. While water was being drained from the uppermost two ponds holding the crayfish, intensive efforts of trapping and seining were employed to mechanically remove the crayfish. Conservation education staff were on site to assist with messaging, and a story by Channel 5 News Las Vegas was made. Upcoming post-treatment surveys will determine the success of the project. From our Eastern region. Eastern region biologists assisted the Conservation Education Division in an ice fishing clinic at Wild Horse Reservoir that was very well attended. They also worked the President's Day Ice Fishing Derby at Wild Horse Reservoir that had approximately 400 participants. The White Pine County Rotary Club's annual Ice Fishing Derby was held at Cummins Lake in late January with nearly 500 participants. Fishing was reported to have been successful for large trout, while roughly 50 northern pike were also harvested during the Derby. From our southern region, the spring razorback sucker sampling effort on Lake Mead was recently conducted by southern region personnel with razorback roundup efforts on Lake Mojave scheduled for mid-March, actually next week. Staff are working with local high school aquaculture and aquaponics program to raise bonitail in a classroom aquaculture system. These bonitail would have to be procured from the Fish and Wildlife Service and covered under a safe harbor agreement permit. Southern Region Fisheries staff was instrumental in conducting the crayfish eradication at the Clark County Wetlands Park, and a huge kudos goes out to Conservation, Education, and Fisheries staff in the Southern Region. And from our Western Region Fisheries staff recently participated in a Wilderness First Aid, CPR, and epinephrine certification course. That was reportedly very valuable for field personnel, and we're looking to send all of our field personnel to this training opportunity in the future. The Monster Fish exhibit will soon be returning to the Nevada Discovery Museum in Reno after finishing its North American tour. Western Region personnel are coordinating with the University of Nevada and museum staff who would like to incorporate some Nevada native fish interpretive displays into the monster fish exhibit. And that's all I have, and with that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
I've got a question for you. The Australian crayfish, where do we think the people even, where would somebody get that to put it into the ponds? That
Had to come from the aquarium pet shop trade. If you'll, for those that'll recall, it's the same species. It's highly destructive. They get really big. Fortunately, they don't tolerate cold temperatures at all. They don't walk across dry land like other species of crayfish, and they're not a burrowing species, which is fortunate. But for those that'll remember, years ago when we had the incident in Looning with a big sign on the side of the highway that said Nevada prostitution legal, gambling legal, lobsters illegal. It's the same species as the individual in Looning that was trying to raise freshwater lobsters. They're a highly invasive and destructive species.
is there a concern? Is there a concern that they're going to end up? The ponds are down in the Las Vegas wash, right? Is there a concern that they're going to end up in the wash as well?
That's our biggest concern right now. Our survey showed that the crayfish were relegated just to the uppermost two ponds, which were far warmer than the other ponds as you go down in succession. They're really highly intolerant of colder water, and by colder water I mean like Lake Mead temperatures. They're really, really susceptible to temperatures. So we're hoping that as if they were to go downstream, they wouldn't be able to tolerate those temperatures. But we're going to be doing some pretty intensive surveys.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
For the record, Kim Munoz, Data and Technology Division Chief. 2023 hunt applications. The Data and Technology Services Licensing and Hunt Applications Units kicked off the 23 hunt application season with a successful spring turkey draw. We had a 27% increase in the number of turkey applications over 2022. The non-resident guided mule deer applications closed on March 6th, and the draw results will be released on March 17th. We had a 0.6 increase in applications over 2022. The division is ready for the 2023 big game application period, which opens on Monday, March 20th and closes on May 10th. The 2023 Heritage Auction Tag sales updates. The following is just a quick recap of the 23 Heritage Auction Tag sales so far. Turkey tag number 1 was auctioned by Pershing County Truckers Unlimited, sold for $800 versus $1,700 in 22 when it was auctioned by Safari Club International. Antelope tag number 1 auctioned by Pershing County Truckers Unlimited, sold for $9,500 versus $32,500 in 2022 when it was auctioned by Wild Sheep Foundation. Antelope tag number 2 auctioned by the Wild Sheep Foundation went for $19,000 versus $25,000 in 22 when auctioned by Safari Club International. The Nelson Bighorn Sheep Ram tag number 1 auctioned by Wild Sheep Foundation, sold for $145,000 versus $160,000 in 22 when it was an online auction by MBU. The elk tag number 1 was auctioned by Nevada Bighorns Unlimited, sold for $220,000 versus $200,000 in 2022 when it was auctioned by Meadow Valley Wildlife Unlimited. Mule deer tag number 2 was auctioned by the Mule Deer Foundation, sold for $160,000 versus $140,000 in 22, auctioned by the same vendor. The overall year-to-date sales on the Heritage auction tags are $554,300. The Heritage Committee is now accepting vendor proposals for the 24 Heritage auction tags, and the deadline for submission is April 17th. The Calcomai contract assignment. The department has submitted the paperwork for the Nevada Board of Examiners to assign the Calcomai contract to Gordon Darby effective March 15th of 23. Calcomai will continue to support the system on behalf of Gordon Darby past the big game draw in May. our geographic information systems. Our GIS staff have all left the department, and we're currently in the process of hiring outside GIS managed services to support the department until we can hire some more staff. Information technology. Finally, our information technology staff has been deploying SharePoint for the divisions and preparing training sessions for everyone on how to use and manage documents within SharePoint. Staff have set up mobile device management for the game division tablets. They've completed the annual computer replacements for headquarters staff, and they're preparing to travel the state to conduct physical inventory. Lastly, they're working on getting all the communications set up for the new Fallon office. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Doesn't look like any. Thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning. Jake Kramer, Game Warden Captain for the record. The Law Enforcement Division, the winter season brought a new set of challenges for Law Enforcement Division to address. Wardens have been busy in all aspects of their mission, including wildlife law issues, preparing for and suspected a busy boating season, numerous public safety issues, community services, training, and administrative duties. For wildlife patrol and enforcement, wardens patrolled ice fishing derbies at Cave Lake and Cummins Lake, resulting in literally hundreds of fishing contacts. In addition, wardens investigated several violations, including a motorist attempting to take horns from Roadkill Pronghorn near Panaca, and in 3 separate cases surrounding the unlawful killing of mountain lions, in which warrants were served in 2 of those cases. Wardens conducted focus patrols during scheduled privately sponsored predator contests, and as a result of those patrols, the wardens issued a citation for having a loaded rifle in a vehicle. With the heavy winter snowfall, trapping season saw reduced participation throughout the state. However, wardens still conducted several trap visitation investigations. As another result from the heavy winter, wardens across northern Nevada saw a large increase in unlawful feeding of deer, resulting in issuing 2 official warnings and 1 citation for feeding of big game. Wardens also investigated a deer attacked and injured by pit bulls, resulting in euthanizing the deer. At the Overton WMA, wardens issued a citation to an adult hunter for shooting waterfowl during the youth season, and are investigating circumstances concerning geese in the Reno area urban parks and reservoirs, which had been shot with arrows and crossbow bolts. On the boating safety side, vessel maintenance and readiness continues for the upcoming boating seasons. We are expecting an increase in boating activity throughout the state, and especially in northern Nevada once the water from the increased snowpack reaches the reservoirs. Wardens are working with the DATS division on vessel registration fraud case in southern Nevada, and a warden investigated an issue concerning a vessel displaying the wrong HIN number, that's a hull identification number. The warden's investigation showed numerous issues with that vessel, which were created by errors made in another state during previous registrations. On our public safety side, wardens assisted in numerous weather-related public safety traffic incidents, including traffic control for disabled vehicles stranded in a travel lane on State Route 222, and several instances from where motorists had slid off the road during the heavy winter snows. In addition, a Tonopah warden assisted the Nye County Sheriff's Office with an alleged report of active shooters at schools in Goldfield and in Tonopah. All reports were unsubstantiated and no physical threat was found. For community relations, warden instructed 2 classes at the Wells High School for forensics class, which is pretty cool. On the training side, field training began for 2 of our new hire wardens, Chad Grape and Jamie Williams. And in administration, the Southern Region Lieutenant Chris Walther and Evidence Officer Victor Jordan conducted an evidence audit in the Las Vegas, Tonopah, and Panaca offices. Game meat was donated in completed cases where the meat was forfeited as part of the wildlife crime. In addition, annual firearms armory inspections are being conducted statewide. Lastly, lieutenants and captains conducted internal audits of body-worn camera data reported hours, activity logs, and our case reporting system. And one thing I failed to put on here in admin is Brian Bowles, our boating law enforcement, or boating law administrator, has left the department and now works for the Office of Personnel Management. With that, I'll take questions if you have any.
I've got one regarding the dogs attacking a deer. Is there any, if it's negligence on the owner's part, is there any legal ramifications for the owner on the dogs that attack wildlife?
Yes, thank you for the question. There may be legal ramifications, yes. We do have some laws. That is an open case, which I would rather not discuss.
Understood. Thank you. Any additional questions? Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I guess just a comment, you know, I mean, laws and regulations exist to encourage people to comply. They're not in and of themselves supposed to be punishing and punitive. They're, you know, you're trying to get voluntary compliance by saying these are your consequences. And, you know, every time you come in here and you start talking about people shooting geese with, you know, arrows and, you know, the dogs attacking wildlife, loaded guns in vehicles. I don't know how many folks you guys know, but I know of 2 people that have lost feet to that. So it can be a real problem. You know, we get these letters from people, you know, kind of sharing experiences that they've had, whether or not they're confirmed or not. But I guess the point is, it's at some point we got to talk about some of these things and ratchet up the consequences. We have to, you know, the vast majority of people are fine. I mean, we're talking about the test range and the stuff that's going on there. You know, folks poor behavior have consequences for the folks that go out of their way to comply and to be good ethical people, and which is the majority of folks. But there's that little small element out there. Personally, I was in the regulatory business for a long time. I'm all in on weeding them out, just working them out of the system. There's no place for them when they're doing some of these things that are occurring. I mean, it's dangerous, and this is a big deal. So I appreciate what you guys do. It's discouraging to hear that you're still dealing with things like, we've all got kids, and the first thing you say, don't do that, knock it off. And what's their first response, you know, or what? And, you know, I've raised kids. You got to go big right out of the gate, and you know, and discourage them from even going there. And we're in that same boat here. And we need to. I think we need to talk about some of these things and push a little harder, push back. Thanks.
I do have one additional question for you. You know, Utah. I think everybody knows Utah put a shed hunting ban until May 1st this year. We have our season as well. Do we expect, or is there any more kind of focused enforcement, thinking that maybe some people might try to come over into Nevada during that period? There's been a discussion, I've heard it from people as well, you know, publicly, there's a concern there. I think the winter kind of precludes a lot of people too, just being able to get around right now. But is there going to be any more, I guess, focused enforcement kind of on that, maybe prior to that May 1st date?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Chairman Cavilla. There is always concern, and there will always be those that take advantage of closures and various ways of getting around, especially in this time right now when access is difficult in the mountains around Ely and such, using snow machines and things like that where access is difficult for game wardens or anybody else. You know, they can do things undetected a lot, or at least assume that they can. So yes, we do have reports. We do know of some situations. We do always expect people to take advantage of it, but we are out there and attempting to find more of the violations. And then the ones we do know of, we do have open cases on as well.
Thank you. And again, I think a year like this is exactly when you need that shit out of regulation, you know, specifically with this much snow. But that's all I've got. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Are we good, Alan? All right. Okay, with that, we'll go to agenda item number 6B, litigation report. Deputy Attorney General Craig Burkett A report will be provided on Nevada Department of Wildlife litigation.
Thank you, Chairman Cavilla. So Deputy Director Scott and I attended a Supreme Court settlement conference last week in the case involving Mr. Mark Smith and claims of defamation that went to trial last February. And that case, of course, involves collection of attorney's fees for the department. We were not able to settle the case at the Supreme Court settlement conference, which follows a series of inability to resolve our differences with in that case. But we did make a subsequent offer, and we're still awaiting a response to that. The settlement conference got continued for a couple months, so we're continuing to work on that and resolve those differences as best we can. And then just one last thing, this is just a clarification. It technically could be part of litigation, so I think it's something I can speak to about in the litigation report. There was a question asked during the last commission meeting about bears and whether there was a requirement to consume edible portions of bears in that hunt as part of under statute or regulation. And I did a stupid thing and gave you a response, which I should have told you, which is always my goal and my protocol is I'll look at it further and give you a considered review. Instead, I gave you a response, and now I think I'm regretting it because I think maybe I got it wrong. So I've commissioned our paralegal to do an exhaustive search of the edible portion statutes in Nevada. She's going back and looking at every single legislative history we can find on that issue to give you the best piece of advice I can, a better piece of advice than I did at the last commission meeting. So first I want to say I'm sorry that I did that, and I should not have done that. It's always my goal to give you the best information I can and hopefully accurate. And I think maybe I didn't give you the most accurate advice. So we're going to give you a legal memorandum that will advise you, A, what the status of the law is on that issue, and then B, if we did get it wrong, and it seems there's an appetite by this commission to perhaps work on that issue, we'll give you some guidance on how you could go about doing that if you do indeed seek to change regulation in Nevada to require that edible portion be consumed for the bear hunt. So I just wanted to give you that piece of advice and again apologize to the commission for doing something I should not have done. Thank you. And feel free to answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Burkett? Seeing none. Thank you. Thank you, Craig. All right, with that, we'll go to agenda item number 6D, Regulation Simplification Committee Report. Committee Chairman Shane Rogers. A report will be provide clarification on Governor's Executive Order 2023-003 pertaining to all boards and commissions in the state and how it pertains to the department.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So just briefly on the Simplification Committee, we did have an opportunity to meet, meet this morning and discuss the Governor's Executive Order. There were a number of items that were proposed to the committee. We're in the infancy stages of addressing this executive order, although we have a relatively tight timeline. I think the deadline is the 1st of May to have this completed. And again, a number of items brought before the committee that were discussed for potential change. The ultimate outcome is we do have some subsequent meetings scheduled. I'll be working with NDOW staff to schedule a meeting sometime the week of March 27. And in addition to that week, we'll also plan on meeting in conjunction with our next commission meeting in April as well, to really kind of hone in and finalize those directives for the governor's executive order. So anyway, as I mentioned, today was the initial step in that process with more to come over the coming weeks and certainly as we work towards our next commission meeting.
All right, any questions for Vice Chair Rogers? All right, seeing none, I'm going to go to agenda item number 6C, Wildlife Damage Management Committee Report. Committee Chairwoman Alana Wise. The report will be provided on the recent Wildlife Damage Management Committee meeting.
Thank you. Last night we had our Wildlife Damage Management Committee meeting. We had two primary items on the agenda. One was our review in that committee of the draft fiscal year 2024 Predator Management Plan. Specialist Pat Jackson gave a very informative presentation, part of which you have seen, but included a lot more information about how we can looking at Project 47, the new Project 47, and some of the things that they're trying to incorporate in regards to mule deer enhancement. So we've asked him to include that in his presentation today to share with all of you. The other thing we did was review the mule deer enhancement program predator proposals. Those came back from the other committees who have filtered them through. We spent a lot of time discussing these, what the best courses of action to take, the effectiveness of lethal removal, acknowledging all the effort that's been put in so far, and trying to figure out what sort of information we needed in order to make these an effective plan in the long term. We discussed a lot of those things and came to the idea that if we can move these forward with the department having autonomy over how these things are put into place, that they are the most capable of effectively managing these projects moving forward. Instead of trying amongst us, people, to come up with the specifics to pass these on to the department, because they're gonna have the best ability to make this the most scientific process possible, to manage the species as best as possible, and to try to inform in the long term what predation management looks like and what it needs to look like. So ultimately, we pass those on to the commission for review.
Any questions for Commissioner Wise? All right, and I think as they basically tie into each other, we'll go to agenda item number 6E, Draft Fiscal Year 2024 Predator Predation Management Plan, Wildlife Stats Specialist Pat Jackson for possible action. The draft fiscal year 2024 Predation Management Plan will be presented to the Commission for review. A report from the Predatory Animal and Rodent Committee meeting held on February 2nd will be shared with the Commission. All comments from the Commission, Park, County Advisory Boards to manage wildlife, and any other interested publics will be compiled and shared with the Wildlife Damage Management Committee for their consideration at the March 2023 meeting. One new proposed mule deer enhancement program, Project 47, will be considered for inclusion in the draft fiscal year 2024 Predation Management Plan. Go ahead, Pat.
Pat Jackson, Staff Specialist for the record. Some advice that now Commissioner East gave me when she was Chairwoman East was a warning when I was about to give a long presentation. So I am, and do you want a bathroom break before I go?
Does anyone want a bathroom break? I think we just roll.
Okay. So Pat Jackson, Staff Specialist for the record, and thank you, Commissioner Wise. That was an excellent summary. And a question that I have in the end of last night, and really probably took the majority of time, was discussion on the various projects from the Mule Deer Enhancement Program, and it was recommended by that committee to discuss them with the Commission. Because that's not listed on the agenda, is that something that I can present on and we can discuss today?
I guess, and I had the same, I was gonna have the same question, Craig, we made some recommendations at the Wildlife Damage Management Committee last night that's specific to this plan. It is agendized that, you know, all these different comments from the different committees are all, I believe they're all relevant to the discussion today based upon how that's agendized.
I see what you're saying. I think you're right.
Okay. So we can have that discussion today.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, with that, I will get started. This will, for the first part, more or less be the same presentation that the commission has seen prior. To keep everybody on the same page, since this can get a little confusing, at the November meeting, I presented on the fiscal year 2022 and provided the annual report. We're currently working in fiscal year 2023. A fiscal year goes from July 1 to June 30 of the following year. Today I'm presenting on the proposed fiscal year 2024 Predator Management Plan, and all the various plans and reports are available on our website, and that's my email if folks want it. And so a little summary on the $3 fee. We are now generating a little over $900,000 annually. Of that, $14,000 is sent to the Department of Agriculture for administrative support. The rest is allocated towards various projects within this annual Predator Plan. It's also used to cover staff salary and overhead, and if we don't use it, we don't lose it. It does not revert, and it does remain available for future years. Acceptable expenditures with the $3 fee are the management of predatory wildlife, research control techniques on predatory wildlife, and then the protection of sensitive species. And then statute also mandates that we spend 80% of our revenues on lethal removal, and that a subset of that 80% of lethal removal can be allocated towards monitoring. And so then some input opportunities, and I'm just realizing that I didn't fix this from last night. So the first public input was at the January meeting, the second was at the Predatory Animal and Rodent Committee in February, and then there was a Wildlife Damage Management Committee, as we heard reported out on last night. We're here today, and then finally be at the May meeting. This is also heard at the various CABs in their meetings, like they have the option to discuss it. And then, of course, you can contact me directly. So I'd like to put on the record that this is certainly not created or drafted in a vacuum. A budget summary. So that just over $900,000 annually that was generated in fiscal year 2022. That 80%, we need to spend just over $728,000 to reach the mandate. And across the various proposals that you're going to hear today, we've allocated $934,000 for lethal removal in this year's plan. One change that I've recommended, we used to report out on various project types as well as levels of monitoring, but they never mixed and matched. So I felt that it took up an unnecessary page and was a redundancy, and just didn't need to exist. So you can see my fancy lines depicting how they did not mix and match. And so now we're just going to wrap the monitoring level into the project type description, or at least that's the recommendation. So projects recommended for continuation. Project 21 is our lethal raven removal for the protection of greater sage grouse. And this has a budget of $175,000. We work with Wildlife Services to deploy DRC 1339, which is a corvicide placed in hard-boiled chicken eggs. And then we are also using products developed in Project 41, which you'll hear me speak on later, to make this project substantially more precise and surgical. We do have a large budget attached to this in hopes that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service budget or permit office finishes their environmental assessment, and that our requested increase in raven take is granted. I don't know if that's going to happen this year or not. Project 2201, the mountain lion removal for the protection of California bighorn sheep, the budget of $100,000 with a goal of establishing 2 self-sustaining populations of bighorn sheep. We work with both Wildlife Services and private contractors. These are some metrics set in place some time ago. Our goal is to have established unique populations in both 011 and 013, and you can see those 3 levels of management. Right now, we believe we're below that 60 individual in each population threshold, and so we do remove lions year-round proactively, whereas if the population grew, it would transition to a more reactive management. And then an example and a project that has transitioned from proactive to reactive, 22074. It's the monitoring of a monitoring an option to remove lions in 074. It's a small budget, and so we feel like this population is standing on its own, and so this is really just a maintenance dollar amount to deploy GPS collars on bighorn sheep to monitor for mountain lion predation, and we can see that we've exceeded that 15 individual number. Project 37, big game protection with mountain lions. This is a statewide project that gives the department the ability to remove lions in short order. We do have multi-year, more established projects, but we do have situations where known offending individuals are causing issues, and so this is the project we use to solve that. This is a table tied to projects 37 and 38 in the predator plan, and these are metrics that we created with the commission, field biologists, and various staff members a few years ago. This doesn't mean that we're going to go in and remove predators, but these are the metrics that we look to have a conversation to say, hey, is predation limiting, and what all do we think? Budget of $100,000, and we work with both wildlife services and private contractors. Project 38, big game protection, the removal of coyotes. Another same budget of $100,000, very similar to the aforementioned project, except that it's removal of coyotes instead of mountain lions, predominantly used to remove coyotes in and around pronghorn and deer winter range to create temporary voids in fawning areas. And to date, we've really just used wildlife services for this work. Project 40, coyote and mountain lion removal to complement multifaceted management in Eureka County. This has a budget, it used to be $100,000. We're recommending $150,000 to add a monitoring component. That did not happen this fiscal year, and it may next fiscal year, but we're working with wildlife services to do coyote and mountain lion removal to complement some other types of management on the landscape, including feral horse removals, habitat improvement, and then some county-funded predator control. Project 41, this is what I mentioned tied to 21, common raven management and experimentation. And so this is the first project that you can see a little additional math. This has a budget of $300,000. However, only 25% of that comes from the $3 predator fee. We're able to match this with Pittman-Robertson funds because it doesn't involve lethal take of predators. And so this is has drastically increased our understanding of raven biology and space use, and is allowing us to understand raven presence and density and really substantially more surgically drive our removal efforts. Dr. Pete Coates of the USGS is the PI on this. He wanted to come today to present on where we'd like to see this project go. However, he had some family issues, and so is hoping to provide those thoughts and presentation at the May Commission meeting. Project 42, assessing mountain lion harvest in the state of Nevada. And it has done that to look at our population, but it really could be referred to as an integrated population model where we used harvest data and existing GPS data to estimate the population across the state. That is done. I don't have the numbers on here, but the estimate was that our population was stable, and we have between 3,200 and 3,400 lions in the state. And some of the next steps are to refine our Shiny tool that myself and other department members can use to do more localized estimates. And then also they'll be publishing a paper on this model that they developed. And so that's kind of taking this fully to fruition, making it more defensible. Project 43, this is mesopredator removal to protect waterfowl, turkeys, and pheasants on wildlife management areas. It's at the moment on Overton and Mason Valley wildlife management areas, and working with wildlife services to remove various mesopredators to create temporary voids to predominantly benefit waterfowl and turkey during the nesting season. Project 44, lethal removal and monitoring of mountain lions in Area 24. It started out as we were proactively removing lions, and then we transitioned to GPS collaring lions to see which ones were and were not consuming bighorn sheep. I believe off the top of my head, we've removed 3 or 4 offending lions that did consume a bighorn sheep. They get a 1-strike policy and they're out. The rest that don't eat sheep have stayed, and they've eaten a surprising volume of feral horses, and you've heard some of those various findings, and we'll be circling back on that as well. But this has grown into an outside collaboration with Utah State and the USGS, and the USGS has provided a fair amount of finances and resources in this project as well. Project 45. This used to be a standalone project to passively estimate the number of black bears in the state. It's now transitioning from a fairly expensive project to established to now just a maintenance or monitoring project to continue to monitor black bears as well as other wildlife across the state. It's also very tied to Project 46, which I'll speak about next. It's a collaboration with Oxford and the University of Montana, and there is a postdoc that lives in Reno, is associated with the University of Montana, but he is on the ground and also, I would say, largely the PI for both Projects 45 and 46, and it's largely a series of trail cameras across the landscape to estimate animal populations. And then here we are with Project 46. This is further north of that initial grid, and it's to increase understanding on limiting factors of mule deer in northwest Nevada. Larger budget, both of these qualify for Pittman-Robertson match and to occur in the northwest part of the state. And the deliverables or goals are to accurately estimate lions, horses, deer, and pronghorn across northwest Nevada, and then also increase understanding of density change and also even some competition. So again, in collaboration with Oxford and the University of Montana, series of trail grids, and then we're also intending to GPS collar lines on the Sheldon. I failed to mention this last night, but I can today. We do have permission to deploy GPS collars on lines on the Sheldon, on and off of their own rendition of wilderness area. However, as soon as we got that was about the same time that snows were super deep, and so we haven't deployed any with a contractor to date. And then this is what those cameras on the landscape look like. Blue represents Project 46, and green represents Project 45. Newly proposed project, as we heard, there's one. Project 47, Mule Deer Enhancement Program, Mule Deer Protection and Assessment. And so when I presented on this at the January meeting, I left it very open-ended, and so I'm going to present a fair amount of additional information and thoughts in the overall trajectory of where I hope that this project goes. And at the May meeting, we'll be presenting a more refined recommendation. So at the moment, has a proposed budget of $100,000, could be conducted statewide. And the two ideas are to identify predation as a limiting factor for mule deer, and then also to build models to direct predator control, both temporally and spatially. And so last night, that was referred to as the decision matrix, and I would even maybe refer to it as a go, no-go tool to understand when we do and don't conduct work. And so now I'm going to present, I guess, a fair amount of thoughts, and I thought it was a good idea to put in the drinking out of a fire hose analogy. So there we go. And then I want to emphasize that not all the things I'm going to talk about are peer-reviewed and documented completely in science, and so this is largely the way that I see the predator management world. And then I presented this at the January meeting. In various, really many different aspects of wildlife management, when we stack assumptions one on top of the other and then take and make a management action on top of that, the taller that stack of assumptions, often the more disappointed we are with the outcome. And so I'd like you to maintain that thought. And then this is my attempt to direct people towards this document, so if you want to scan that QR code, it'll direct you to the Nevada's Mule Deer Population Dynamics, which was written by Tony Wasley when he was the Mule Deer Staff Specialist. A lot of really great information in there. It really goes into the population dynamics and driving factors. And then taking one of those figures out, figure 15, I know folks really like to see statewide population estimates of our various big game species, and so here they are from 1976 to 2000, represented in bars, and then that line is the state's annual precipitation. So the $3 predator fee. The point I want you to take away from what I'm about to talk about is that this is a very finite resource, and I take the fiscal responsibility in spending it where it's going to have the biggest bang for the buck very seriously. And so Hypothetically, here in a year or two, I would expect that we may see needing to spend upwards of $800,000 annually on lethal removal set forth in state legislature. If you divide that by the number of counties, just saying, hey, this year we're just going to give a proportionate amount to each county would get $50,000. And so $800,000 is a tremendous amount of money to me. $50,000 is still a lot, but from a statewide management standpoint or even a county management standpoint, it's not that much, and so we have to think about how we're spending this. This is a figure I made some time ago that I think captures the historical essence of how predator control projects have been spawned. Predation was a concern or perceived as a limiting factor. Little to no data was collected, and predator control removal was conducted. Retrospectively, managers and the public wondered if it worked, and since it wasn't set up to make inference, various interpretations exist. And so Project 47 is my hope to get out of this kind of circular situation. And so some other biological examples, I'm going to talk about a lot of predation management species other than mule deer for the next several slides. So this is a slide the USGS developed. In this, it represents raven presence and then raven density from 71 to 75. So the bigger the circle and the darker blue the circle, the more ravens there were. And then you can see this is the same from 2006 to 2010. And if I had summoned their more recent slide closer to 2020, this would be even more compelling. And so we know definitively that there are more ravens than there used to be. This isn't conjecture, this isn't intuition, this is a fact. So using common ravens and sage grouse and the management of both as a case study, we know, as I just showed you, that there are more ravens than there used to be. We also know and have studied, submitted, and had manuscripts published on that ravens do limit sage grouse nest success, and that limitation goes up as there are more and more ravens on the landscape. Lethal removal does create temporary densities of raven presence, and when done appropriately, that density reduction does increase sage grouse nest success. And all four of those cornerstones are accepted in academia and science and captured in many, many different publications, many of which are funded in part at least with the $3 predator fee, and you can find those, or at least a list of them on our website. And so we're in a really strong, defensible, understandable place. We know what we're doing, we know the problem, and we at least know part of the solution. That doesn't mean that we've solved the problem, but we know where we're at and where we're going. Some other aspects of predation management that we do that are defensible and are largely referred to in the predator management plan as an implementation style project, where we're focusing on the management technique and not necessarily striving to make inference or even learn something from it, but we're proceeding with confidence because it's been demonstrated to work in other places and is accepted in the science community, management community, as well as the literature, which is bighorn sheep introductions. Bighorn sheep largely avoid predation by using escape terrain. When you take a bighorn sheep and move it, it doesn't understand the escape terrain that it's available to it, and so you, as a manager, want to create temporary absence of lions for that introduction, and in the initial phases after the sheep have been established, while they figure out who's who, what's what, and where to go to feed, water, and how to get away. Similarly, small bighorn populations, a subset of mountain lions do learn to specialize in the consumption of bighorn sheep, and so small populations are particularly susceptible to mountain lion predation, and that's an appropriate time to protect those herds, as we heard in Project 2201 and 22074. Pronghorn fawn survival. This isn't as vastly captured in the literature, but it's still been demonstrated that the lethal removal of coyotes prior to pronghorn fawning season often increases pronghorn fawn survival. And then we have mule deer, which have been tested a number of times across the literature, and the findings have either been found to be none or to be there but not statistically significant. And that doesn't mean that we can't help mule deer by conducting predator control, but being in the boat that I'm in, it makes it harder to come to the commission with a confident recommendation on how to do so. And that's where we're at with Project 47. Some other thoughts that I'd like everyone to take into account. This winter may make this point null and void, but from a mega drought, this is a figure from a publication, and I probably should have cited it, my apologies, but we are in the driest 23-year period of at least the last 800 years. And so that has a profound effect on our entire landscape. And so this is a slide from my collaborator Dave Stoner out of Utah State. And so some work that he did in 2018, I'll just skip to the end. And so in this picture of a lush landscape, more precipitation, more vegetation, you only need 60 square kilometers to support a mule deer. Whereas in this substantially more arid photo in the bottom right, you need 1,500 square kilometers. And so if you think about the landscape of Nevada, when we get multiple wet years and we have a more lush landscape, we can have more animals per square kilometer. But in a mega drought, we can have fewer animals. And if you tie that back to the figure from Tony's bulletin, that's demonstrated in annual precipitation and the estimation of our mule deer across the state. Likewise, when you have more deer, your density of deer are higher, and their home ranges are smaller. Lion home ranges can also be smaller. And so you can see in Utah, that lion had a home range of about 395 square kilometers, which is on the small side. And then that lion that shared its home range with Nevada and California at 6,500 square kilometers, that's on the ragged edge of what a mountain lion needs to make it. That's an enormous home range, and densities in that part of the world are very, very low. And then I also want you to retain this idea that wildlife are constantly breaking our assumptions. I should have asked for a more recent figure from our staff specialist, Cody Schroeder. These are mule deer movements, but I've enjoyed hearing conversations with him and John Ivonic and other places that collars have been deployed. The assumptions that we make on where our deer spend their time in the summer and winter, I would say, are more often than not smashed when we actually deploy collars and go and see what deer do. So we're not as good at guessing as we might think that we are. Another example of that, John Ivonic, our Washoe County game biologist, did his master's in Modoc County. This is not his figure, but during his master's, they intentionally avoided deploying GPS collars on juveniles because they dispersed. And I think at one point, he deployed 30 transmitters. Not all those lions lived very long, but not one of his lions dispersed into Nevada. And then here is a new graduate student that is intentionally only marking juveniles because they want to see where they disperse out of Modoc County. And you can see that this is only 5 individuals, and it's certainly preliminary. But when there's a narrative that because of the management of lions in Oregon and California, that there's a waterfall or cascading effect of them pouring into the state, that's a very believable narrative, and I'm not saying that it's wrong, but as a scientist, when I find things like this, it makes me want to dive deeper instead of just come to the commission and recommend a management action. And so some other interesting factoids that I've had in discussions and thoughts with various colleagues in directing or trying to focus Project 47. And again, these aren't peer-reviewed. This is just food for thought. I'm not saying that all of this is completely accurate. Fawns born in a dry year or drought are up to 1 pound, weigh 1 pound less the moment they hit the ground than a fawn born in a wet year. And so that's a really compelling example of the compounding effects that drought have on our wildlife, where if you think about how much longer it's going to take that fawn to reach a size to be able to keep up with mom to avoid predation, and then in a dry year, the way that mom has to forage, she's going to have to go further from that fawn to take care of herself as well as to get resources to nurse, leaving that fawn that's already smaller more vulnerable to predation. 250 doe mule deer may add or do more for recruitment than 1,000 other mule deer does. Mule deer during the fawning season are very territorial, and mule deer that drop their fawns in prime habitat are giving a tremendous advantage to those fawns. And so those fawns have so much of a leg up. Substantially more of those may, not always, but may make it to recruitment, become an adult, and become part of the adult population than does dropping fawns in subpar habitat. A prolonged rut may exacerbate predation impacts. If you think about a show on the Serengeti and all the various wildlife that live on it, one way that prey outcompete predators is that a lot of the young of the year hit the ground in about a 2-week time span. And so it's pretty easy pickings for predators for upwards of a month, but then the surviving young of years survive, reach a size, and become harder to track down. If you see, because of various biotic and abiotic reasons, our mule deer going into the rut over a longer time period, we're not having that saturation phenomenon on the other side. And then lion predation can be additive or compensatory based off fawn ratios. Additive mortality is when a predator eats a prey species and it actually shrinks the population. Compensatory is when a predator eats a prey species and that prey species would have died of something else. And then an interesting little tidbit from Project 44, since the inception of that, in visiting mountain lion kill site clusters, 45 of those clusters have been coyotes. And I'm by no way, shape, or form saying that we should manage mountain lions to manage coyotes, but that's a surprising number to me, so I thought I'd share it with the commission. And so where can we go from here? In the aforementioned conversations I've had, there's a state director with Wildlife Services. He's currently the Texas state director, but for quite some time was the state director in Utah. He wrote a white paper that I didn't know about until very recently, and it discussed a lot of philosophy and concepts that I really think are going to make a very strong foundation for Project 47 to look at, work with, and apply to Nevada, and then take this even further. These are not my slides. These are Mike Bodenchuk's slides. And these are the 18 factors that they believe are necessary to consider for predator control. And this is across all predator-prey situations in Utah. This isn't just applicable to mule deer, and a few of these probably wouldn't be much at all, but this is just some initial food for thought. So linear habitat, this applies more to nesting waterfowl along coastal situations. Access to water, I mentioned that with the mule deer doe having during a drought go further for water and resources, and it has a lot of other effects. Fire, if you have prime habitat and you have a patchy fire go through, wildlife can still use that habitat, but to a lesser degree. And when you have, say, 50% of hiding habitat removed, predators, through pretty obvious deductive reasoning, would only go forage in the other half. And so fire can really impact habitat and how our prey use that. Excessive cover, pinyon juniper encroachment does increase the ability for mountain lions to spot and stalk their prey across the larger proportion of the landscape than they did before fires were suppressed and landscapes use was changed. And so cover is certainly something to think about. Drought, I think I've belabored that point. And then perches, this really applies with ravens and sage grouse. And then also escape cover, which I kind of mentioned in fire, the availability or lack thereof for prey to get away. From predation factors, the number of predators, Mike really emphasized to me that out of these 18 factors, this is only one to consider. I would say that it's a very documented phenomenon in ravens and sage grouse that as raven densities go up, their impacts go up. I'm not convinced that this is always a situation in mammalian situations. The social structure of predators, and that could have to do with coyotes as well as mountain lions and more mature animals or more disrupted social structure. Invasive predators, probably not applicable to Nevada. And then territoriality and ability to bridge to alternate prey. And so I'm not saying that this is the case, but a certain plausible outcome with mountain lion and feral horse management in the state, and we've heard this discussed with Project 44 before, is horses are on landscape, lions can eat horses and deer, and so now there could be more lions. And that's something that we're working with Utah State to look into, just food for thought. And then also individual behaviors. You heard me say mountain lions learn at times to specialize. About 30% of the GPS-marked individuals in Project 44 would be identified as horse specialists, but we also do see some lions on the landscape that are bighorn specialists, and that's a situation where we want to focus on bighorn eaters. And then also pressure from multiple predator species has the potential to have an impact. And then prey factors, relationship to carrying capacity. I've talked about this before. Carrying capacity has a fair amount of overlap with nutritional carrying capacity, and so that's back to the drought and the amount of square kilometers that can support our wildlife. And so the more groceries on the landscape, the more water on the landscape, the higher carrying capacity is. Breeding synchrony, you heard me talk about that. And then group size composition, that could have to do with social structures of mountain lions or a number of things. And then also alternate prey. An example of this could be in conversations with an Idaho researcher. There were times when lagomorphs were robust, that he thought that there was a strong argument to not conduct coyote control because a jackrabbit in particular is a substantially safer meal for parents to focus on, but in the lack or absence of a robust lagomorph population, they focus on mule deer more, and that may be a time that we would want to focus on coyotes. Some other things that have changed, there's a new field station leader at the Coyote Research Center with Wildlife Services, and he is a prime candidate as somebody to work with. He's smart and applied, and is really interested in this type of work, and Logan, Utah isn't all that far away. And then we also have a growing collaboration with Mark Ono, who's here today with USDA Wildlife Services, to get to the bottom of a lot of these questions. And I'm about done. Where I'd like to end up, these are the 5 species that fall under my program. We can take wolves and talk about those for another day. We do manage bears from a hunt standpoint, but we don't spend $3 fee. And so it really just leaves us with these 3 species. We lethally remove ravens, coyotes, and mountain lions for the benefit of other species in the state. And as I've explained, we're in a really defensible place with common ravens, and I wanted to get us to get to a more defensible place with mountain lions and coyotes so that we aren't having to stack assumptions on top of assumptions and are in a place where we can be frugal, fiscally responsible, and then also biologically responsible. I probably should have thrown this in a little earlier, but just another tidbit or food for thought, the minimum effective dose. So both last night and tonight, I don't have my computer, so I don't get my presenter notes, but off the top of my head, it takes 30 kilojoules to raise 1 liter of water from 20 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. And you can apply more energy than 30 kilojoules, but it's not going to boil the water anymore. It's already boiling, and so any more is arguably a waste. And so this is another concept that I'm seeking to understand is, what is the minimum effective dose to properly manage predators in the state? And so back to the circular situation, I want to get out of this. I want to move away from doing things off of perception or just observation, and I want our decisions to be founded in data. And with that, it's a preliminary announcement of a Mule Deer Summit that the department will be hosting August 17th through 19th this year, 2023, at the Winnemucca Convention Center. We're going to have various biologists, researchers, academics from inside and outside the state come and talk about predator and prey dynamics, drought, feral horse management. It should be a good time.
Thank you, Pat. All right. Any questions for Mr. Jackson?
And just for the commission's understanding, I do have a few slides about the Mule Deer Enhancement Program proposals after this. I assume we want to talk about the plan and then those, but I didn't have that last night. I made them since then, so I wanted you to know.
Do we want to have questions for Pat now, or do we want to look at the Mule Deer proposals, enhancement proposals? Commissioner Keel?
Yeah, I have one unrelated to the mule deer stuff, so we can take it now, but back to the ravens, Pat. So, you know, the last slide that you showed demonstrated we have the science, we have the data, we don't have the ability to up that take because we've been bound up in NEPA assessment for at least the 5 years that I've been on this commission under an environmental assessment. Is there something that the commission can do to expedite that, or, what are your thoughts around trying to provide us more of a, take essentially to, not affect what we're now assuming as one of the major limiting factors on sage grouse population is ravens?
Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. I think that that's a great question. And as the staff specialist, I would express frustration that we don't already have an increase in a permit, but in advice on how the commission should talk to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, I would look to our director or DAG. I'm not going to tell you what to do on that.
No advice. I don't know if we have any leeway on that to push on them, right? Yeah. Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Pat, my hat's off to you trying to find a foundation to build a conversation. You threw it all out there, and I really appreciate it. I've had phone calls since our last commission meeting, and, we're all guilty of it. I'm guilty of it. We have our biases. We have our positions that are hard to move us from, and a term that I'd heard Tony Wassley use in the past is, we're subject to our own echo chambers, and it reinforces our biases. And, I'm guilty of it, and it's a big lift, and I don't know how we have those conversations, but we do have to start this. We have to go this direction. We have to get away from this circular thing. We have to, there are projects that maybe I'm not as willing to admit, we have a predator problem. Although I've always supported the predator plan, because I do look at it as scientifically based, so I can't remember one project that I've voted against off the top of my head. So I've been supportive of it. But there are other times where I see, I'm concerned that we're doing things when it may not be the primary, and it's just throwing money away. There's other things that should be done. So, Pat, I'm all in on your efforts to reframe the conversation. You really boiled it down. I appreciate it, and we have to have them. My conversations with folks after the in between commission meetings, man, I went right through the circle. We ended up in the same spot after a very long time talking, and we have to find a way to break these conversations down, and we have to find a way forward, because it's starting to tear us up a little bit, and the people that we represent, that we all represent up here, it doesn't have to be like that. So it's not going to be an easy pathway forward, but and the increase in ravens, bird count surveys in the wintertime, our Christmas bird counts used to be very rare very unusual that we'd get a raven in Reno on the Truckee Meadows bird count, and we're seeing them every year, and this year we had 62, which is a big number for that count. So there's no doubt that they're increasing. There's no doubt about it. We have to come to grips with that, and they can be hard on things that you talk about, and they're smart. So anyway, you prompted a lot of thoughts in my head, Pat.
Any additional questions or comments for Pat? Let's take a look at the mule deer stuff, and then at that time, after we look at that, we'll take it out for comments and public comment as well.
Okay, Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. So I have said numerous times in working on the mule deer enhancement program, predator proposals, that we're building the plane it's taking off, and that is probably obvious today. These proposals were support material for the Wildlife Damage Management Committee. So if folks want to see these in greater detail, then you can reference those. There's 4 PDFs tied to last night's meeting, but I threw these together this morning just to capture the essence of what they'd like to do. And so these are all either coyotes or lions, and then they're all for the benefit of mule deer. And then they were spawned locally, and then went through, the Mule Deer Enhancement Program public process. The Oversight Committee that met a few months ago voted, recommended to fund all of these out of projects 37 and 38 that you heard me present on earlier. And there was quite a bit of conversation last night about this. And then another takeaway is it doesn't have to be a pass-fail. The commission has the ability to recommend changes either in time or location, and then also money allocated to the efforts. And so this is one of the 4 antelope range predator removal, and so this is upwards of 75,000 in units 111 to 115 to remove coyotes. 121, the Cherry Creeks lion removal, up to 75,000, and I thought I had changed or put all these dates in. Hear that as 3 years, not necessarily May 22 to April 2025. And then management areas 22, 23, and 24, removing coyotes and fawning habitat, and again, that should say 3 years, my apologies. And so to kind of capture what I tried to convey last night, did this in my hotel room this morning. So, and again, this is just my lens. If somebody has a better analogy, a way to look at this, I am all ears. But if we think of a 3-legged stool with our predator project sitting on the top, there's 3 legs to that stool. And so one of those legs is the public process, and input from the public, what the public wants. To belabor that point, I do want to acknowledge that we have a $3 predator fee that our sportsmen pay whenever they apply for a big game or a turkey tag. And so it's their money, and this is the public process, and these are proposals that they provided. Proven techniques, as you heard me talk earlier today about the implementation style projects, we don't always strive to make inference on everything that we do. Sometimes it's said, hey, this is documented and works so well, we're just going to go do it. And then there's also some times where we want to learn some things. And these aren't all mutually exclusive, but the way that I see it, it's a stool and it's 3 legs. I would say that as these proposals are written, that there really isn't, I can't give you a manuscript. I can't reference a conversation I've had with a professional colleague in Nevada or another Western state that says, this is definitively how to kill mountain lions or coyotes to help mule deer populations. And then from an experimentation standpoint, there's a little bit of that leg. The fawn ratios that most of those projects recommend monitoring, assuming that the department would prioritize, and I believe they would, aerial flights to get those surveys and then weather conditions and all the other things allowed, we would be able to speak to the change in fawn ratios over the 3 years of these processes, but the way that they're set up, I could not tell you whether predation was solely responsible, partially responsible, or not responsible at all. And those are my thoughts.
Questions or comments for Mr. Jackson? I guess one item that came up too last night is the dollar amounts that the mule deer committees are asking for. Based upon our discussion last night, it seems like those are way on the high side. It would be, it's actually less money that would be utilized for those projects. They're not, you wouldn't be married to that $50,000 or $75,000 a year. It'd be less money. That was part of the discussion as well. Any additional questions or comments for Pat? All right, I'm not seeing any, so any cab comment in Las Vegas?
Paul Dixon, Clark County. Speaking on behalf of myself, just because I listened to the meeting last night, one of the things that we've been talking about for a long time and Pat, with this three-legged stool, really emphasized it, is we have a really strong public piece here, but the background you need to get the information to say whether you've been effective in what you're doing and to make it all science is the hard part. And so it's almost you have to spend non-lethal to get the background before you go do the lethal, so that when you do the lethal, you can actually get to the other side and say, I had success. And everything we do is driven by this public process and getting to the lethal part of it, but we're missing the other parts. And that's, I don't know how we fix that, but that's kind of the education piece, and I appreciate Pat putting this together because it really clearly illustrates that by not doing that, we may take out a bunch of predators, we may have zero impact, negative or positive impact, but we won't know the relationship. And that's the hard part for me. And when Commissioner Keel said we've been doing this for 5+ years, we've been doing it, I've been on for 15 years, we've been talking about this. And we keep coming back to that same dialogue of the public perception. We actually got NRS legislation that said 80% because people believe that by having a greater percentage, we're going to have a greater impact. But we've never done the upfront science piece. And if you do the upfront science piece, you can use Pittman-Robertson or Dingell-Johnson dollars. You don't have to have, you can actually get matching dollars if you have that upfront science piece in this. And you can make the dollars we have go a lot farther. We don't do that because we don't get the public support to get there. And I don't know how we make that happen or the commission makes it happen, but that's something we need to be working on. Thanks.
Okay, any cab comment on Zoom? Seeing none, any public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing none, any public comment on Zoom? All right, with that, we'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch.
So I did have, like I said, I had folks calling me, well, one person in particular. I think there is a misperception that, and maybe it's mine, I don't know, somewhere along the way, but when you're using these funds for lethal removal, is there a PR match in any way, shape, or form?
Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. The short answer is no, or at least not to date. That is a situation I believe that the Fish and Wildlife Service will allow for an endangered species after an environmental assessment. And so that is an applicable situation to date in Nevada.
Because there are people that believe that's the case, and there's an irritation that we're not matching those funds. That was my understanding all this time. They apparently have some examples that we should follow up on. They're suggesting that we do. I'm not. They can pursue that directly with somebody else, but so that's how we've been operating, I guess. And I don't know if anybody else was under a different impression, but the only time it's matched is on the non-lethal removal side of things, 20%.
And Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. So that came up in discussion at last night's meeting, and I can and will reach out to the Fish and Wildlife Service. There is a line that they draw somewhere with monitoring of lethal removal. I don't know everything about that and what the Fish and Wildlife would deem lethal or an experiment on understanding non-lethal. As far as examples of other states, I this week called my counterpart in Colorado, Mark Hurley, to talk about some other predation management issues. And for a little while, Colorado was spending Pittman-Robertson funds on predator control in an experimental fashion, and they either did or were threatened to be sued and stopped. And so I think they were told by the Fish and Wildlife Service, you can't use these funds.
And so I don't even know how we start these conversations like Pat's trying to start when we can't even when we can't even have people trust that that might be the case. It's tough. It's really tough. So thanks, Pat.
Any additional questions or comments? Commissioner Keel.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Pat, I'd just like to get your thoughts on, it seems like we get bogged down that we have to have some of this scientific data or some of these projects defined from the inception. Isn't there a way that we can look at, historic data versus a control area? I mean, we've been removing predators now for years. I mean, is there a way we can build that, or do we have to have, a control or an experimental project from the inception?
Pat, that's a great question. So Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. And I would say that it depends. And then I would also say that that is a topic that we'll be delving into very deeply at the Mule Deer Summit. And that is the study design. And so, as I said, if we want to look at fawn ratios and we're able to conduct an aerial flight every year, like, we'll have those numbers. But if you want to understand, was it weather, was it fire, was it predation, was it a combination thereof, then you have to collect more data. I've said before, and I'll say it again, the counting costs more than the killing.
Additional questions or thoughts? No, I mean, there has been a lot by the Mule Deer Enhancement Program, to that whole process. These guys put a lot of time into it. One other item we discussed last night was on the habitat side. We did the ranking. We ranked projects, and it helped everybody kind of make a decision. And I don't necessarily know if that's been done on the predator component of that, the Mule Deer Enhancement Program. I obviously haven't sat in on all those meetings, and I think the department had input on the on that ranking sheet, I believe. But that did not happen on the predator side of the Mule Deer Enhancement Program either, from my understanding.
So maybe just to clarify, thanks, Chairman.
Commissioner Kill, yeah.
So the Wildlife Damage Committee meeting last night was supportive of the inclusion of, I think there was the 4 projects, but they weren't necessarily ranked, nor were we necessarily comfortable with the dollars presented in that.
Yeah, we wanted to bring it to the commission for a discussion. Yeah, and then, I mean, yeah, we discussed the dollar thing, and the consensus was the dollar amounts that seemed like those are all real high compared to what would be needed in reality. And then we just had the discussion, and not necessarily myself, I'm just trying to remember, but it might be worth it in some of these spots, and solely to look at just fawn recruitment. The department said they could go, and Pat just mentioned it as well, they could go fly every year, and we could look at fawn recruitment in these targeted areas for predator, coyote removal or lion removal on the 2, I think. But we thought it was worth bringing it up to the commission level to take a look at. And obviously, the commission makes that final decision, not that committee, so.
Commissioner Cavilla. I recall last evening that the matrix aspect of the projects, rather than having each project and throwing out money and not knowing what they're doing, but use a matrix process to where if it's effective, continue it. If it's ineffective, maybe stop it. That way you're controlling dollar amounts at the same time. If that's what I recall of with our conversation.
Correct, too. Yeah, we did. Yeah, we would have you'd have to run it multiple years, but you would, at a point, obviously, I think all of them asked for 3 years. You'd look and see if it's worthwhile or not. And basically, I think the way they propose them, it's solely off of fawn counts. And granted, I think we all understand there's way more, there's other variables. There's a lot of environmental variables in that as well, but the criteria for that was solely off of fawn counts. It's a tough one because, as you can see, we had the same. Last night it was tough too.
Yeah, and obviously I'm a little bit biased because I'm on that Mule Deer Enhancement Committee, but I think based on the discussion today and in support of the Wildlife Damage Management Committee's recommendations, that I'll move to, I guess, move along this draft predation plan for 2024 as presented today with support, or with the recommendations included in the Wildlife Damage Management Committee's recommendations to the next meeting.
You want me to second that?
Okay. So we've got a motion by Commissioner Keel, seconded by Commissioner Wise, to send the draft fiscal year predator management plan to the next commission meeting and incorporate the recommendations from the Wildlife Damage Management Committee for the Mule Deer Enhancement Program projects to be included in that plan. Okay. All right. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Motion carries unanimously. With that, we'll take a quick 10-minute break. If everybody wants to make their way back to their seat, we'll get going again. All right, we're gonna get going again. Go to agenda item number 6F, Wildlife Heritage Grant Manual, Wildlife Staff Specialist Mark Fries. The commission will review recommendations made by the Heritage Committee to cap principal balance projects at 50% of the available balance per year. Go ahead, Mark.
Good morning, Habitat Staff Specialist Mark Fries. You guys have a copy of the memo. I'm happy to read it, go over any of it. Here to stand for questions.
Yeah, maybe just read through it real quick.
Okay, the summary NRS 501-3575 was updated in 2021, which includes the following. In addition, the department may at any time expend from the account any portion of the amount of money in the account which exceeds $5 million. At the June 24, 2022 meeting, Wildlife Heritage Committee recommended to cap principal projects at 50% of the amount of available funds per year. Under the explanation, NDOW is conducting its annual review and edit of the Heritage Grant Manual, providing an opportunity to incorporate new guidance on the limitations of the amount of principal balance of available funds annually. The Wildlife Heritage Committee has recommended a cap of 50% of the principal balance above $5 million per year. Any approved principal balance guidance provided by the Commission will be incorporated into the Heritage Grant Manual that will be presented at the Wildlife Heritage Committee at their May meeting. The Department recommends that the Commission review and adopt the proposed Heritage Committee recommendation for inclusion in the Heritage Grant Manual.
Okay. Yeah, and I know we talked about, creating this, formalizing this, a long time ago, and I finally thought it's a lot of money, so I think it's worth having this in writing. So that's why I asked we take a look at it. Does anybody have any questions or comments? Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess there's two concepts that are kind of blending together on me here, and I'm just trying to make sure I'm on the right page. So we have the concept of this, anything over the 5 million, the department by statute has an opportunity to spend. We have money that comes in every year, and right now we're using, we've been using 75% of what comes in on an annual basis plus any accrued interest on the whole total amount for our projects. So are we taking that 75% and bringing it down to 50% on that? This is the bigger picture, that if the department wanted to spend above the 5 million, so if we have 10 million, the department, there's 5 million that by statute the department would be eligible to utilize, but we're saying that our policy or in the grant manual, we would only say that only 2.5 of that, 2.5 million would be available. Is that right?
Director Janay.
So for the record, Alan Janay. So if you remember the report we gave back on the Heritage principal balance, I believe it's sitting at 12 million something. And so currently what's available in the principal balance is above that 5 million would be almost $7 million or over $7 million. So what this would do is manage that principal account. It is not touching the 75%, which funds the 75% or the interest that funds the annual projects. This would be considering that bigger balance and the projects that come forward. So the idea that was presented at the Heritage Committee is that it would be a way to ramp down and ensure that principal balance remains over time. So in this year, if you were looking at $7 million available, there could be a possibility where 3.5 would be available and approved by the commission, but that's all that could be. And then that would take that balance down to probably that would be 9 million next year. And so then at that point, there would be only 2 million available for that year, And so it would ramp back and try to maintain that over time so that there wouldn't be, it would still allow the commission, it's simply guidance, but if in the future, people would look back at it, future commissions would go, this was the guidance and this was the reasoning. Wouldn't entirely stop my understanding from, should there be a big enough need, there could be a approval process for the balance, but this would provide that guidance and the expectation within the Wildlife Heritage Manual.
I appreciate the clarification because I definitely was leaning the other way. And because this is in statute, this is a really thin hair to split, in my opinion. I mean, I don't think we're in any legal problems here, but we don't want to, as a board, I don't think, I think we have to be careful to imply that we're overriding the opportunity by the statute. So maybe I'm being a little too sensitive to it, but anytime there's something that's permissive in statute, when we start adding, and we're gonna only spend part of that, I don't necessarily see a conflict. I'll leave that up to Dag Burkett, but at the same time, we're not all gonna be here. And there might be a point where that wire gets crossed and, it's hard to uncross that stuff sometimes, so.
Any additional questions or comments? And I guess one advantage of leaving that money in there is the commission does get to spend that interest every year. Right, so that the more interest we accrue yearly, you do get to spend on heritage projects.
Yeah, and we've been good about leaving the principal alone. We really have, but this is a bad time to be talking about this in the legislative year. There's a lot of money in there. And I hate to highlight it like that. I still think it would be really awesome money for a seed bank myself, my seed system. Alan's heard it a million times. I think it's a great opportunity. Pretty soon there's going to be man, it's unbelievable how much money runs through that system. And we're hearing that it sounds like things are continuing to climb on these tags, so it's crazy.
And I guess I do have a question. This wasn't an action item, so do we need to?
Yeah, you don't have any authority to do anything with it.
Okay. So I guess if we do want to take action on it, we'll have to agendize it again and,
Right.
Okay. 10-4. So I guess for today you're off the hook, and then if it's the interest of the commission, we'll put it on a future agenda, but it's on everybody's radar now. And if anybody's got any thoughts, they've got some time to think about it.
So with that in mind, is this something that we want to incorporate in policy 11? We've approved it, but is this a concept that, as a commission, because this document is the department's manual that references our policy. So is this something that we want in policy as a statement from us, or because otherwise, I mean, you see with my conflict here, because it's a department manual that we're saying, hey, you need to shove this in there.
Mr. Janae.
For the record, Alan Janae, and I appreciate it, the comment by Commissioner McNinch. It does become kind of this circular conversation because policy 11 right now points to the Heritage Manual as the guidance and how that program will be administered. And so, yeah, I mean, we could put it inside there. We could put it inside the grants manual and reference the decision should the commission get to that place. We could reference that decision, but it could be something that could be incorporated, in a revision of policy 11 if the commission felt strong enough.
Not that I'm overly excited about looking at policies more, but we want to get it right too, so. I guess that's something to think about as we move forward. I'm processing it too. I'm not suggesting one way or the other. I'm just trying to see how it all fits together, so.
All right, and then maybe you and I'll have a discussion, Dave, before we put it on the agenda and how we think about it a little more. All right, with that, with no further comment, I'll go to agenda item number 6H, Pathways to Relevancy Project, Conservation Educator Bobby Jones, a presentation on NDOW's Pathway to Relevancy Project consisting of a brief project overview and synopsis of the statewide survey results.
If I may, Chairman, I'd like to just introduce and give a little bit of an overview of this. This is something we've talked about before. I remember Tony bringing this forward and having this conversation, but Bobby has agreed to come up and give us a rundown of a survey that was conducted as part of a multi-state conservation grant that we worked on relative to the Pathways of Relevancy Project to help us understand and serve the public. Basically, it takes, and he'll present on the findings from that survey, but it helps us understand, Nevadans' outdoor interest, possible barriers, and how they feel about the agency. But I look at this as a good opportunity for the agency and for the commission and the cabs to all understand, reflect on what we're seeing, and contemplate, how do we incorporate that into our management and opportunities into the future. So, but I definitely want to appreciate, Bobby being willing to come forward and present this to you guys. So thank you very much.
Bobby Jones, Nevada Department of Wildlife, Conservation Education Division, Outdoor Connection Coordinator for the record. Thanks, Alan. Yeah, I'm going to present today on the Pathways to Relevancy Project. Alan said it's a multi-state conservation grant, so we were one of 4 states to do a similar type project. And let's jump right into it. And I haven't presented you all before, but I kind of have 3 tenets to my job title, and it's a little unique. So connect people to nature, help the department better serve and engage our public, and hopefully we do those 2 things to enhance conservation throughout the state. Just to give a brief little background, relevancy timeline, a lot of you are familiar with that term, state fish and wildlife agencies working to be more relevant to their public. This is just a timeline. We're familiar with the Wildlife Values Report that came out in 2019, the Relevancy Roadmap also in 2019, and then I just wanted to point out that we started this project in 2022, and it's specifically meant to help us work to implement the roadmap, and essentially to take our first few steps. So what did we do to do that? Just briefly, 2 little snippets here. The roadmap is kind of a choose your own adventure for a state fish and wildlife agency. We can take the things we want from it and do those. We don't have to do everything within the roadmap. And that also that we don't want to leave anyone behind. This is hunting and fishing and everything else that we can provide the public that we serve. This is the project title, just to give you a little bit more background. It's focused on underserved geographies and populations, but along with that, we wanted to get a baseline for what the population as a whole looks like. We are much more familiar with our hunting and fishing public and being biologists, but how about all those people that may be less familiar with us? What does the general population look like? And I've got the 3 pictures to the right. Clark County, Washoe County, and the rest of the state is how part of these survey results are presented to you, and I want you to know it's a representative sample of the state. So we surveyed 863 people, and Responsive Management put the survey tool together and implemented it for us, but it's representative. So we've got about 75% of our population in Clark County, about 15% in Washoe, and the rest of the state makes up about 12%. But I wasn't the only one that worked on this project. There were 18 of us internally, and then we were assisted with conservation specialists with lots of experience working in this realm. We picked our target populations, and then we did user group interviews too. So I'm going to show the quantitative results from the survey, but we also interviewed groups that represent the 3. And we collectively as a group picked 3 target audiences, people that we thought we could serve better. And we focused on young adults and young families, the Hispanic and Latino population, and people who recreate outdoors, but they're not primarily wildlife focused. So anything outside of hunting, fishing, wildlife viewing, whether it's walking, hiking, camping, you name it. These are the three groups we wanted to learn more about, but as well as the population as a whole. And this is a very old picture of gas prices, as you will see. And I just use that as a function to show, you see that right off the bat. You're very familiar with exactly what gas prices should be, even if they're higher than we want them to be. But we needed to get a baseline, essentially, for what the population as a whole is. So we wanted to know, how much time do you spend outdoors? What are you interested in? Are you interested in camping, hiking? What is it? How does your health relate to these things? And then if we have a good feel for the population baseline, we can compare and contrast with different groups of people. What's important to people? This is a breakdown. I'll just walk you through some of these things. The report is 200 pages long. This is just snippets from it, but these are reasons that people cited as the most important for why they spend time outdoors, and I highlight these very top ones because it's true across all populations and demographics. Fresh air, mental health, relaxation, and stress relief. And I wanted to say this earlier, but I forgot. Please stop me at any point and ask questions that you have. I'm going to try and race through a bunch of stuff. I don't want you to forget. Here are some barriers to the outdoors. Time is the most overwhelming barrier by far to why people don't spend time outdoors. And weather is number two in this list. I just like to point out that the survey was conducted in late July, early August, so that's probably ranking higher because of that, especially since so many people are here in Clark County. Places nearby, health, and cost. And I don't have a slide on it today, but you'll see the outdoors is or can be unsafe. 6% of Nevada adults felt that way, and about half of them, it was because of people, and about half of them because of wildlife. What percentage of Nevada adults have heard of NDOW? I'm asking you it. I'm not going to have you take a guess, but I'd like you to think about it. It's not a gotcha question, but these are some of the types of questions that we went through. So Nevada adults that have heard of us. Turns out to be almost 80% of Nevada adults at least know that we exist, and about a third of them know quite a bit about us, or a moderate to a great deal. And I've got a picture of a pyramid here just to show that they may not know a lot about us, but I would tell you 4 out of 5 adults recognizing the Nevada Department of Wildlife is a pretty good number. What is the maximum distance people are willing to travel to visit a park or natural area? So just conceptualize how far you think people are willing to go. I'd also like to point out, it's kind of interesting, Pat talked about it a lot before, our different perspectives. We're essentially the product of the people that we spend the most time with. So if you spend time with people who travel a lot, you may be surprised by some of this information. So we've got the mean and the median here in the box, but essentially half of Nevada adults will not travel further than 50 miles to visit a park or a natural area. So it's a river, it's a state park, it's a national park. Their maximum distance is at 50 miles. So, if we're talking an hour away, we've already, lost half of the population, half of the adults for how far they're willing to go. And there are still about a third of people who will go over 100 miles, but you'll see that the bulk is centered around these smaller mileage totals. What percentage of people trust NDOW, at least most of the time? 73%. At least 73% of people trust us at least most of the time to make decisions for what's right for wildlife. And I'd like to point out that almost never comes in at 3%. I know it feels like it might be larger sometimes, but this is just in context of all of the adults within the state. Lots of insects. This isn't about insects. You can probably take a guess at what I'm talking about, but the reality is that there are a lot of insects out there. There are a lot of people out there. There are some of them that bite and sting us, and those are the ones we remember and the ones that we spend a lot of time thinking about protecting ourselves from, and then there are the ones that we like. And it's just a concept that we usually hear from very small pieces of the population, but the population as a whole, we don't usually have a good feel for who they are and what they're doing. And that's kind of what this whole project is focused on. How do we get a feel for who those people are? This is a slide on words. We essentially ask people, how do you feel about these words? Do you have a positive association with them, a negative association with them? Essentially, more green means more positive, and this is all of the adults. And I picked these pictures on the left. For a lot of people, they see the same animal, an antelope. It just depends on what audience you're talking to, what kind of words we're going to want to use. Hunting heritage is not a bad word. There's just more of a negative perception associated with it when we speak to the general public than a room full of hunters. And these pictures on the right are actually a roan antelope and a pronghorn antelope. So the biologist in the room is going to point that out, but the member of the public that's seeing that is probably not going to know the difference. But just context for how we use words in wildlife. And like biodiversity, it ranks out relatively low. It's fourth from the bottom. I imagine that's a reflection of people aren't familiar with that word. They don't know what that means. Or whatever they associate with it, it's less positive than it could be. We also ask people what types of activities they'd like us to be doing. And this is a breakdown of it. On top, you've got a grouping of 3 that people are very interested in. They want us to talk about wildlife in their neighborhood, things they can do with friends and family, opportunities to learn about wildlife. I think one thing that I took away from this slide was that I was surprised at the level of interest in recreational shooting. It actually outranked learning about wildlife online through social media. Now, there is more of a dichotomy there, and you'll see that with certain things, and that's what recreational hunting is. There's a quarter of the population that wants nothing to do with it, but there's a pretty sizable chunk that is curious and interested in recreational shooting opportunities. I mentioned the 3 groups earlier, and what's fun about that is that if we focus on specific groups of people, we learn about different groups. So I mentioned earlier one of them, we wanted to learn about young adults, and so by doing that, we also learned more about adults ages 35 to 54 and adults ages 55 and up. And there's lots of differences between. If you look through the entire report, you'll see breakdowns and breakouts for region that a person comes from or where they live, ethnicity, age, and the recreation activities that they're interested in. And I just have circled here the 3 that we focus to learn more about. I know you're all very excited to read the report. When you get into it, you're going to see a lot of pages that look like this, and I just want to walk people through that. The overall hashed percentage is the absolute average. So for this question, percent of each of the following groups that describe their health as very or somewhat good. So people that consider themselves healthy, essentially. Overall, 69% of people feel that way, Nevada adults. Anything within 3% of that, positive or negative, so 72 to 66, we can essentially say the number of people we surveyed, the math isn't strong enough to say that matters. Everything in there, essentially, there's no statistical significance. Anything 4% away from the average or greater, that counts. We surveyed enough people that's important information. I just want to point out a couple things here that I find really fun, and it is intuitive. It's not all rocket science. On average, young adults are healthier or consider themselves healthier than adults ages 55 and up. So here we've got 76% of 18 to 34-year-olds say that they're healthy, and we've got 65% of adults that say they're healthy that are ages 55 and up. And we can say with that there's enough there that it's statistically significant. And I used age because it's the closest thing to this next piece that I'm going to get into. People who spend an average of 6 hours or more outside a week. And you'll see that if you spend more than that, you're healthier than if you don't. And the difference is almost just as significant as age. So for people who spend 6 hours or more a week outside, 73% consider themselves healthy, opposed to less than 6 hours a week outside, 63%. I just like to focus on that dichotomy because that's exciting. And now I'm going to get into a little bit, I jumped ahead. A little bit about the specific groups that we looked at, and this is young adults. So young adults are more interested than the average person in camping, hunting, off-roading, recreational shooting, and paddle sports. They know less about us and they trust us less. That essentially goes for any group. Just the less they know about us, the less they trust us. They are most sensitive to travel distance, and especially so in Clark County. Clark County residents are less willing to travel to visit natural areas than any other portion of the state. And then if we want to communicate with them, they prefer social media and phone apps more than the other groups. Now, you saw the slide earlier where I talked about how far people are willing to travel to go to a park. This is a slide dedicated to the same subject, but focusing on young adults. Essentially what this says, here to the left, the median is 30 miles for young adults. So half of young adults will not travel more than 30 miles to visit a park or natural area. And I have these two pictures here because if you're downtown Las Vegas and trying to go to Lake Mead, that's over 30 miles. And if you're at Meadowood Mall and you're trying to go to Lake Tahoe, that's over 30 miles. So half of your young adults have told us they're not willing to go that far to visit those areas. A little bit of information about the Hispanic community. They are more interested, in average, in camping, off-roading, boating, hunting, and paddle sports. They know less about us and they trust us less, very similar to our young adult population. And the barriers that they face to the outdoors are a little bit different than the population as a whole. Time is a more significant barrier, and not having friends and family interested in doing outdoor activities with them, which makes a lot of sense if that's culturally important to you, to spend time with family and friends, and they don't want to spend time outdoors. We kind of should expect to see this as a bigger barrier. And then ways to communicate with this population that they cited as better, social media, and then specifically TV and radio ranked out really high, and we'll see that here in a second. This is the barriers to the outdoors for Hispanics compared to the rest of the population. On the left, I have the actual percentages, and then on the right, the percentage difference, essentially. So time is a barrier to 38% of the population, 58% higher, and so on and so forth. So we see that not having friends and family ranks out really high, at least friends and family interested in outdoor activities. We don't have places nearby to go, cost, and that breakdown is on the right. I've got a picture of a little boy with a hearing aid here, and it's essentially just getting to the point that we ask people to tell us how to communicate with them, and there are differences between groups, so if we want to communicate better with them, we should choose these methods to communicate. Rather than being in a room full of people and someone who's hard of hearing and yelling at them, we should exit the room and talk to them there. Essentially the concept. So here, specifically, you can see how far TV outstrips. For Hispanics, TV is such a more sought-after communication method as well as radio. And then I also told you about the outdoor recreators that don't hunt, fish, or are interested in wildlife viewing. So I'm going to get into a little bit of that, but not much. But I wanted to say up front that there's a lot less signal there than there is on where you live, how old you are, and what your ethnicity is for being strong indicators of other things. So this breakdown is just based on interest. So I'll walk you through the wildlife side. So wildlife viewing, hunting, and fishing. What this 56% stands for is 56% of adults in Nevada are very interested in at least one of those three activities. So they get counted for that bucket. So the middle bucket, the nature bucket, hiking, picnics, paddle sports, camping, boating, 79% of Nevada adults are very interested in at least one of those things. So you can get counted for different buckets. The only thing I'd add essentially here is that if you fall within the wildlife bucket, you're very likely falling within all three buckets, but not vice versa. Just a few additional tidbits that I found interesting. People who were not white or Hispanic are very interested in fishing and recreational shooting compared to the rest of the population. And this is a tidbit you'll see throughout. If you look through all these, a lot of the outdoor activity interests, females rank relatively low, and on fishing they're the lowest. But I'd also like to point out a caveat to that that's our fastest growing angler demographic is females. So just because 41% of females, rank out as the lowest single variable for interest in fishing, there's still a lot of people interested in it, and that you got to take all this with a grain of salt. And like I said before, if you live in a rural community compared to Wash or Clark County, there's big differences between these populations. Broad takeaways here. People who know us trust us. The more they know about us, the more they tend to trust us. This is at the broadest scale. Time is a significant barrier that we want to address when we're trying to encourage people to spend more time outdoors. And people who spend more time outdoors are healthier, happier people. And unfortunately, people are less willing to travel than I'd like to think. And then these reasons, fresh air, mental health, emotional health, stress relief, are the most important reasons that people cite for spending time outdoors. Just really just personal reasons. I've got a picture of the gym and a nice walking path here, just pointing out that, you know, lots of people know that you're going to the gym to improve your health, whether you want to lose weight, feel better, it's evident. And what I'd like us to focus on is that we can kind of say the same for the outdoors. And we'd like to make that more of a focal point, that people go there to feel better, to get out of the house, to get fresh air. These things are really important on a personal level. So this is a pitch of a marketing campaign and idea. It was mentioned earlier, you know, hey, how are you going to market this stuff? And 17 minutes a day in nature is the new 10,000 steps. Now, it might not be exactly this, but this is us trying to associate that, one, address a time barrier. People don't have a lot of time. 17 minutes a day is something people can wrap their minds around. Then we're telling them it's similar to the next 10,000 steps. Everybody knows that people get on the 10,000 step kick and they watch their Fitbit and they want to know that they got their 10,000 steps in. And I just like to cite that this is just an idea concept that we came up with that we're going to work on, but it was actually a paper in Nature Scientific Reports that showed that people who spent 2 hours a day, or 2 hours a week, 2 hours a week outside were healthier, happier people. And 2 hours a week is 17 minutes a day. Why does it matter? Essentially just some of these takeaways and what I'd like to get at. Just because we're a function of the people we spend the most time with, I'd like to point out 54% of Americans ages 6 and up recreate outdoors once in a given year, and walking for exercise counts. So not as many people as you may think go outdoors to enjoy the outdoors, whether that's walking the dog, going to the park, going camping, hunting, fishing, you name it. Half of Americans didn't do that last year, or almost half. We spend a lot of time on our phones, our computers, tablets, 7 hours a day on average. 1 in 5 Americans will experience mental illness in a given year, and 2 in 5 are obese. 1 in 5 kids, but I didn't put that one on there because it's just too dark for me to think about. And then just why some of the good of that, right, is that you spend more time outside, we're healthier, happier. Outdoor recreation as a whole helps support and diversify our economies, especially our rural economies, and then improves our quality of life. And I think that is it, and I would welcome any questions.
Thank you, Bobby. Is the report online, or?
The survey results are online. We wrote a post on it, Nevada Relevancy Project. So the survey results are there. There's a link to a podcast, and there's also a link to the relevancy roadmap.
Okay. Any questions for Bobby?
Yes, I'd like to a question relative to selling this to the public. Why are we not trusted at a higher percentage, do you think? Are you talking about NDOW personally?
To be honest with you, thank you for the question, Commissioner Booth. Bobby Jones, for the record. I think 80% or 73% is pretty good. Relative to other types of agencies, federal agencies, other state agencies, we far outstrip them in terms of trust. So it can be more of a function of just general distrust of the government, or opposing views. They feel like it's not representative of who they are to some extent, or something like that. But 73% is not bad, for sure.
Okay, thank you.
But I would say just more information, right? And I probably should have mentioned this. You'll see in there that the people who trust us the least are the people who have never heard of us. So even just a simple understanding of who we are as an agency can go a long ways.
Okay, I didn't know what that really meant. I thought 80 or 90 would have been better, but if you indicate that it's higher than other governmental agencies, that's a well-received perception then.
But to your point, 80 or 90 would definitely be better. And that if more people just understood who we were, or if we found ways to reach those people, I certainly think there's room for uplift there.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner McNinch.
We're probably higher than IRS for sure, so I suspect. So it's kind of hard to sell them. We've got a good product to sell. You know, wildlife's and nature's a good product. You know, so so Bobby, what's what's next? And is there anything this commission can do to help push forward?
Thank you for the question. Honestly, I raced through the beginning of the presentation because I was so sweaty still. But you would have saw on one of those slides that I cited there's a draft relevancy plan that we haven't finalized that we'd like to essentially draft relevancy goals. And we're going to set those in line with our strategic plan goals and work towards those things. And it's essentially, how do you better serve those three groups, the young adults, Hispanics and Latinos, and people who recreate outdoors that aren't primarily wildlife focused. And we did draft some goals. We just have to finalize what they are and move forward with those.
And it all ties into, you know, I mean, we were talking earlier about the apprentice program and the mentor program. That's a super small percentage of what we're talking about here. I mean, we're talking about millions of people here in the state of Nevada, and how do you appeal to them? How do you continue to improve those dynamics, those numbers, and how do you provide what they're looking for? You know, and so it is big, and you know, we tend to, when we're in here, you know, we tend to be real issue specific at times, but you know, the whole idea is that we all do stuff outside of what we're in here for, that, you know, that what the department's talking about would impact us. You know, I don't know, I'm assuming there's some runners and some hikers. By the way that I'm built, you can probably guess I'm not a runner anymore, but anyway, I throw that out because it even impacts us in different arenas outside of what we're interested in here, so.
And if I might add, Bobby Jones for the record, the one thing I didn't touch on that you'll see if you go in there is that outdoor interest is very high, and it doesn't really matter what activity you pick. People want to spend time outdoors, they're very interested in it, but interest far outstrips who's actually out there doing it. We can look at anything, whether it's you know, rock climbing, hunting, camping, fishing, you name it, the interest is far higher than the people who are doing those activities.
Commissioner Rogers.
Thank you, and thank you, Bobby. I thought that was a really good presentation. But did I hear you say that the numbers or sample size was 800 and something? And maybe it's an opinion question on your part, but in your opinion, is given the total overall population of the state, do you feel that that is an adequate sample size to get relevant data from? And with that said, then second part of that, of those 800 and whatever the number was, were the percentages based on Las Vegas, Reno, and then rural, were they in line with those percentages?
Thank you for the question, Bobby Jones for the record. Yes, so the 863 is representative of the state. The survey tool was also sent out in Spanish and English, and it essentially, you can look at some of the questions. So I showed you the sheet with the hashes, and when I said the 3% within, above or below doesn't count, that was essentially saying the math, we didn't have enough to say that those things were significant. But with 863 people, anything that was 4% away from the average or greater, we could say with confidence was statistically significant. So it kind of depends on the question. If we're asking if it's things that fall within those parameters, we can't say that we have the mathematical or the statistical significance to say that or not for each one of those factors. But as a whole, it's a pretty dang good general sense of the different questions. And we didn't set up the survey tool and we didn't implement it. We went through responsive management, and they've got, I want to say 20 or 30 years, I'm not sure how long they've been around, but of providing polling data and similar methodologies to sampling people, especially in the conservation arena. So honestly, it's a pretty good sample size relative to the 3.3 million, but you'll see in there as you go through, there will be a little, like for this question, in this many people. So I want to say there's somewhere close to, 280 respondents were said that they were Hispanic, which is, I want to say that we're in the 28 to 30% Hispanic at the Hispanic adults for the population. I think more is better, but it's also it's a function of cost. These really big surveys to do them in a way that you are representative of the population is difficult. It's not just an email sent out to, the email addresses that you have. They're essentially paying to get a representative sample of the state.
It's one of the most interesting things to me is how they set these studies up. And, so they ask, I'm assuming that what they do is they ask the department, what confidence level do you want? Do you want to be 95%? Do you want to be 75%? Do you want to be 1%? And if you go, the closer you get to that 100%, the more people you have to survey to close that air gap. So I imagine that you were at a 90 or 95%.
Correct. I believe Bobby Jones for the record, I believe everything is set up for a 95% confidence interval on each one of those.
Yeah, and so it's plus or minus, the 5% is, so you're within this range on these percentages. You're talking, that there's a confidence level that it's, that most of your respondents are going to fall within that range. And, it's pretty cool because, it doesn't seem possible. How can 800 and something represent 3.3 million? But statistically, it pans out. That's how. And, if you want it tighter, then you got to survey a lot more people.
And the assumption being surveying more people, you're probably not statistically going to get a deviation.
It'll get smaller. That deviation will get smaller as you survey more people, because ultimately, if you survey everybody, then you know exactly what they're thinking, and you shut that down to no deviation at all. So, that's how that works. It's pretty cool stuff.
Any additional questions for Bobby? All right, Mr. Janae.
So I just wanted to wrap it up and kind of explain a little bit further, but this is an opportunity, for the department to contemplate. We believe we do a really good job at servicing, our traditional constituents, hunting and fishing. And we sit in here and we talk about that a lot. But we also talk about, recruitment, retention, and reactivation. And we talk about relevancy to try to get the public to understand, Department of Wildlife and what we do. And I've been, having been thrust into the legislature, I realize, even at the legislature, there are folks down there that don't quite understand what we do. And so it's that this is a great opportunity to look at the survey and use its results to see how the public perceives us, and take those, what we learn out of this and try to improve how we communicate to people and demonstrate that, the most simple things that people look at and value in outdoors, like clean air, clean water, healthy habitats, healthy ecosystems. Those are things that we do. We absolutely assist in managing the landscape and wild places to try to do that, and that becomes a really good conversation when we're having, discussions with people that are novel to the Department of Wildlife. And what we do is trying to explain and make that connection to their most basic needs, and then bring them along into, other ways that we can help them. And I think the thing, the project that Bobby's talking about, that 17 minutes a day, I think that's absolute genius. Is this trying to get people thinking about being outdoors and appreciating the outdoor space, and in a way taking it in and thinking about their health, beyond just, this recreational activity that you do. I think getting to that point where people are contemplating this is not only for mental health, but this is for physical health of the environment. It's I just think there's a lot of work and a lot of space for us to work with the public to try to improve our relationship with them and help them understand our relevancy to them and to the state. But hopefully with that is that we see, increased users, and participation, and also, you know, when we go down to have a conversation in the legislature, they know who we are and what we're about, because there's a lot of important things going on down there, and when you have to educate them as to who you are and what you're about, you probably don't stand much chance at getting your priorities pushed through. So, but I think this is a great opportunity, and I was glad that the department was part of this process and part of this survey. I think it's a real glimpse, and I encourage you all to dig into the survey results even more, because some of it's pretty depressing when you contemplate the lack of people getting outside. 54% of the people, you know, have only been outside one time in a year. That's scary to me. I mean, and I definitely want to be trying to communicate to those people to try to get them outdoors more, and then also make their connection to wildlife. So anyway, I hope you guys saw the benefit in it, and you know, go back and review it, and we can have future discussions along those lines.
Thank you, Alan. All right, no additional questions or comments. I think we'll take a quick break for lunch. Maybe we'll come back at 1:30. Or do you want to run through it?
If you, for the record, Alan today, if you wouldn't mind, if we could run through, because we've got that field trip, and we've got some folks that are kind of waiting on us, and so if we could muster through, then we can kind of tie lunch into the field trip and make it run if
the
commission would approve. Thank you.
All right, let's go to agenda item number 7. Administrative Procedures, Regulations, and Policy Committee. Committee Chairman David McNitch for possible action. The APRP Committee has concluded with committee meetings and will focus on the last 4 policies through the Commission. 7A, Commission Policy 23, Predation Management, third reading. APRP Committee Chairman David McNitch and Deputy Director Mike Scott for possible action. The Commission will review Commission Policy 23 and may make any necessary changes and may decide to repeal, revise, or adopt the policy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, the department's taken our policy 23, and remember, just as a reminder, we had it was really complex. There was a lot of information in that original policy. It's been trying to catch up to new statutory language. Statutory language that's changed over the years. We brought forward some proposed changes. We worked from one version of the policy from 2013, I believe, and then from 2016. And I asked the department to bring in the track changes. Anyway, we kind of blew everybody out of the water, is what I'm saying. So they've come back and they've really cleaned it up. Now they based on some of our comments, they removed. There was an education component that's not currently listed in statutory language. So there was a effort to pull that kind of language out of the policy, and also to remove as much ambiguity as possible, while still maintaining a flow to the policy. So I think unless anybody has questions of me, I'm going to turn it over to Mike and Pat to kind of talk about what they've done and let them explain. But I think we're real close here, and Pat's got one proposed modification to what we've got in front of us. It's not overly complicated, so we'll be able to handle it here. So thanks, guys.
Pat Jackson, staff specialist for the record. So editing a document with a committee without it on a screen is probably not the most efficient way to do it, but in the description that Dave just said, we, the department, kind of jostled between a 2013 and a 2016 version. We, the department, were also cleaning up that mistake. And so a mistake that we would like to remedy, if you'll look on page 4 of this policy, I'm going to be talking about item 4, or let's call it paragraph 4 and paragraph 5. And so what I'm intending to do here, because there's a lot of redundancy between these 2 paragraphs, and so I'd like to combine them, and it's the Commission's prerogative, if you like my recommendation, to either leave 4 and 5 as smaller pieces, or combine them, and you can hear the recommendation that I'm about to make. So in paragraph 4, a little way through the middle, I'm going to read the sentence. At the March meeting, the commission shall review the report of the Wildlife Damage Management Committee and may vote to make a recommendation to the department on the rankings of all projects. I recommend at the end of that sentence to delete that final sentence. And then looking to paragraph 5, a little over halfway down on the first page, I recommend only retaining the following. After consideration of such comments, the commission shall make its final recommendations to the department on the final draft plan at the March meeting. The commission may approve the draft plan at the March commission meeting. If not approved at the March meeting, the department will incorporate the commission's recommendations and present the final draft plan at the May commission meeting for final approval. And so what these two paragraphs do is they capture the process of the various committees and public entities that provide input, and then it affords the commission more autonomy to approve the predator plan in March or bring it back for a final reading in May. Some years ago, it was forgotten that it was locked in to be approved at the May meeting. The commission approved the plan at a March meeting, and then upon review of policy 23, I had to come back and say, hey, because of policy 23, you've got to approve it again. So we're just giving you the option to do it at either meeting. I do have another small suggestion for paragraph 4, but I don't want to overwhelm you, so. Okay, in paragraph 4, the sentence 2, after consideration of findings and recommendations of the department and with respect to lethal control projects, I would ask that you remove with respect to lethal control projects. If Wildlife Services, contractors, the Predatory Animal and Rodent Committee, or anybody else has a recommendation on a non-lethal project, we're not going to not take that into consideration just because it's said so in the policy. And so I feel it's more collaborative and accurate if you struck that.
Commissioner Rogers.
Yeah, I had a quick question, Mr. Jackson, and clarification. On paragraph 5, you were proposing to strike the beginning of that all the way down to the sentence that begins with after consideration. So you were wanting to strike that and just leave the remaining part?
That is correct, yes. You could either combine the paragraphs. It would probably be my personal preference to just remove that in paragraph 5 and leave it as a shorter paragraph. But yes, what you asked, that I agree with what you just said. I would like everything removed that you asked.
I have to ask a question, Pat, and we kind of mentioned it last night at the Damage Management Committee meeting, but when this went through the committee and the previous commission, we added an item under the what's included in the predation management plan. You know, we had added an item about a status update by, you know, the cost expenditures, amount left, how many years it's been ongoing. And that was removed, and I know it's going to get brought up in public comment as well. So I think it's worth a discussion, because the committee had discussed that as well. The commission had looked at that, and then it is not on this current plan.
So Staff Specialist Pat Jackson for the record. If you look at, on the very last page, on number 9, the annual predator management status report, that is an informational only item that I provide every year at the commission meeting. And so I just want to emphasize that there is a chance of redundancy. And as of right now, this policy has a plan that's, created in several public meetings, and then also a report. So food for thought there. As far as what was in previous renditions and what's in here now, if you look at I'm looking at page 3, the predation management plan, then turning to page 4, the various items that will go into the plan. We have letter R, a project summary, and that was intended to capture everything that the department would like committees, commissions, public to take into considerations, but it does not tie the hands of the department, if you will, on what we're required to spell out.
Commissioner McNinch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I unfortunately didn't have a real opportunity to talk to Pat about this particular issue. So, yeah, I think the public is still interested in trying to incorporate some of those, the concepts, the cost expenditures. And Pat's expressed some concern to me that, it's the proprietary stuff. You got to be, they don't want to. They don't want to present stuff that can be taken out of context when there's so many other things going on as part of these plans. So there is a balancing act there. I want to respect Pat for, maintaining some integrity to his projects and not having them spin off into these little tornadoes because, he presented information to us that wasn't fully explained, that's not explained in that real quick tidbit. So, but I think just adding that, the cost expenditures amount, including a project summary, including, I think that we can add that in there just as a clarification of what we're, a couple of the little detail points that we're looking for. And maybe there's a little bit of ambiguity that we create with number 9, but I think that I don't think that we're going too far outside of the lines on that one. So that's my thought for now. Yeah.
Any additional questions or comments? And this one is an action item, so any cab comment on Commission Policy 23? I see none in Vegas. Any cab comment on Zoom? Oh, okay, any public comment in Vegas?
Mr. Chair, Commission, Jana Wright, Clark County. This was very difficult for me to follow because in October of 2022, the APRP committee made changes. And this particular document that I put on the screen has the language that the committee adopted. And I would also say that in October, there were changes I know that Commissioner Wise made that were not reflected in this document. I think it would be helpful if the proposed version of 2022 was the document that the commission had before them, because just spot checking certain lines of the backup material, it doesn't jive. So what you're proposing to approve today is disturbing to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comment in Vegas? Seeing none, any public comment on Zoom? Okay, seeing none, I will bring it back to the commission.
I'm not sure, there's not a sword to fall on per se, but I guess I'm trying to trying to explain that we could do the track changes like we've done. We can try to tie it all back together. What happened was we went down a path and we did ended in a real mess with the track changes. And I take that responsibility because I'd asked the department to bring that in so that everybody could see. And it created a lot of confusion, and that was unintentional, but it did. So what's really happening here is just a rewrite. It's just a new thing. And if there's components from the original old version, so let's try to walk back away from all that mess that we brought forward, and go back to what was the original policy and look at what we're proposing now. I think the intent is to get rid of some ambiguity, and it's just being presented as a new policy. So there might be some concepts that are missing, and if that's the case, this is our opportunity to kind of to check those and decide if we need to incorporate them in this new policy, understanding that what's happened here is that if you look at some of those sections, there were a lot of pieces were cut and pasted so that you could track it through each section the same, but they said the same thing. And these have just been smashed together to try to get rid of some of those that redundant language and try to make it flow a little better. So if there's concepts that we're missing, we should identify those and get them in here. But I think to do a track changes of the old one is really difficult at this point, because we've played with the 13 one, we've played with the 16 one, and I don't know if any of that makes sense. I'm trying to process some of this still, I guess.
No, and I was on the APRP committee with you, and I agree. We tried to do a track changes document, and it was almost impossible to read. It really was. It was extremely difficult. So I don't know if I don't believe there's a fire under this. If we want to wait one more time and give everybody the opportunity to look at one more time, Commissioner McNinch, or if you think we're
again, I'm not feeling pressured, other than it would be nice to get done. But the department reached out to me, and I didn't get back to them before this meeting. So here we are. They did what they could to make this happen, and I don't have a problem sitting down and reestablishing what documents we're working from, because there's a lot of stuff out there now. It's unfortunate, but I think we need to just, I'm trying to think my way through this right now, and I don't feel the pressure that we have to approve things today. We can still work through it and make it right. I know the department would love to move on from this whole thing, and I tell Kaylee's going to think I did this on purpose, making her come back and deal with this. But yeah. All right.
Commissioner Wise.
Pat, well, if I may, Pat Jackson, Staff Specialist for the record. I have no crystal ball on the outcome, but I would just put it on the Commission's radar that there is currently a BDR to change how the $3 fee is used. And so after this legislative session, we may be opening this policy back up again. Just food for thought.
I just wanted to add that while I'd kind of like to look at it again, I unfortunately don't have all the renditions of notes in front of me, but at points were made, I do recall that it probably struck some language that looks like it's still in here, and without being able to look back at that, I couldn't with confidence say that it's the policy that we've developed over the last several meetings.
So here we go again. What I will do is I will make sure Mike and I and Pat will talk about how we can frame the review, if you will, and see if we can, kind of slice out some of those documents that have been causing us a little consternation, and make sure that we bring something that we're all on the same page with, and maybe we can put a little one sheet page together that says, hey, here's where we're at. Here's what's out there. Ignore these. This is the one that we're working from, and we'll try to draw some, we'll try to draw some lines. And if there's things missing, we'll be prepared to talk about why they got pulled out. and why they're coming back here. We can run this through the APRP again if we need to, but I think we can just deal with it here is probably our best bet, and explain why things were kept in and why we pulled things, redundancy or irrelevance or whatever it is. So, you guys okay with that?
Mike Scott for the record. Yeah, I think that's fine. And I apologize. This has been kind of a challenge because we were working off the wrong version when we did the most editing. And so when we brought that together with track changes, it was a disaster. And so this version is our attempt to clean that up. That's why you don't see a track change version. But this would be our recommendation, our starting point, and as Staff Specialist Pat Jackson mentioned, he already has some edits that he'd like to make to these. There may be some other edits, so I would say let's bring this back one more time with any additional suggested edits, and I'm not as concerned about the timeline as I am getting this right. So that would be my recommendation.
Thanks, Mike. I agree. And just for the record, when this policy was written that we're reviewing now, it took probably a year and a half to get it done the way to where it was before we started to look at it again. So just takes time, I suppose. I guess I wish we could have just knocked it out, but I agree we need to do it right. So if you guys are good with that.
All right, so based upon that discussion, we will take no action on agenda item number 7A. Look for it in the future. We'll go to agenda item number 8, Commission General Regulations Workshop, public comment allowed. 8A, Commission General Regulation 506, possession of golden eagles under certain circumstances. Wildlife Diversity Administrator Jennifer Newmark for possible action. The commission will hold a second workshop to consider amending Nevada Administrative Code 503 to allow for possession of a golden eagle under certain circumstances.
Good afternoon. I'm Jennifer Newmark, Wildlife Diversity Division Administrator. So we're going to talk about, this is the second workshop for Commission General Regulation 506 that would allow for possession of golden eagle under certain circumstances. And if you'll recall, these potential regulations are the result of passage of SB 125 in the last legislative session. And it would allow for possession of a golden eagle if the eagle is obtained for rehabilitation in accordance with federal law, is obtained in another state in accordance with federal law, including through the federal depredation permit lottery system, is legally possessed in another state and the master falconer moves to Nevada, or is transferred to a master falconer from another master falconer in Nevada or another state if the department authorizes the transfer. So the proposed regulations will set up the premises for those situations. And in theory, these slides are going to match with the page numbers in our support material. And I'm really going to try to just focus on areas that are different this time in the second workshop than in the first workshop. So you'll see the blue and the strike-throughs. Those are all changes that you have seen during that initial workshop. And then the highlighted yellow pieces will be the new changes from the last workshop. So in section 3.1, we have stipulations. This is the section that deals with how and where you are allowed to have your golden eagle. So you must have a valid master falconry license. You must have the valid eagle permit. You must have a current and valid hunting license. And if you're rehabbing an eagle, you have to have a valid permit to rehabilitate raptors. And this is new language that we are proposing that the department would like to see, while in possession of a golden eagle must possess a copy of a valid hunting license, master falconry license, eagle permit, and rehabilitation permit if applicable. So that will be new language from the last, and it's not in the support material. We realized that there was not any proposed language in the regulation that required them to have their actual paperwork while they're in possession of the Golden Eagle. Section 3.2 is sets up language for non-residents to be able to use golden eagles and falconry on a temporary basis in the state. Section 3.3 is for persons moving to the state. As you recall, we are requiring that they get all of their master falconry license and eagle permit in place within 30 days of becoming a resident of the state. Under permit application section 4, we were originally proposing that they have to have driver's license and social security number, and instead the department is proposing that we use the applicant's client ID number instead to protect their private information. And then in discussions from the last workshop, also the physical address of an eagle's location. And so we need to add just physical right before address of the eagle's location. And then finally, if rehabilitating a golden eagle, a copy of the rehabilitation permit or letter from the licensed rehabilitator who is requesting and authorizing assistance from the applicant. Section 4 of the proposed regulation continued, talks about how while the person is applying for the eagle permit, what their stipulations are. They must have 2 letters of reference from persons who hold master falconry licenses and lawfully possess golden eagles in Nevada or another state. And they must include an assessment of the applicant's ability to care for and fly golden eagles and a concise history of the author's experience with golden eagles. So we're adding that "and" in there to make it clear they must have both. And then in number 3, a master falconry licensee with an eagle permit may apply to renew the eagle permit by submitting an application that includes copies of the requirements set forth in subsection 1 and submitted with their original approved application. If you recall, we were discussing at the last workshop, do they have to go through that whole, get a new letter, et cetera, et cetera. So this simplifies it and just allows them to include their already approved documentation. Section 5 is for non-resident specifics, and there's no changes from the last workshop. And similarly, section 6 that deals with golden eagle conditions and recommendations if the eagle is not in good condition. There's no changes to these sections either. In section 7, which is housing for golden eagles, we are proposing to remove the at least 12 feet in length, 12 feet in width, and 8 feet in height, and instead use language large enough to allow the eagle to fly if it is untethered or if tethered to fully extend its wings or bait without damaging its feathers or contacting other raptors. And this was based again on feedback from expert falconers that their feeling was that if we had that large of an enclosure and we didn't leave it up to them, that sometimes that could actually be more dangerous for an eagle, and sometimes you need to have them tethered in certain circumstances. In section 8, we have new language under 4. A rehabilitated golden eagle must be released in a location that is as close as possible to where the golden eagle was captured, taken, or removed from the wild. We're adding the stipulation or at an appropriate location authorized by the department. There was some discussion around if you had an eagle that was rehabbed, for example, at a wind facility, and you wouldn't want to necessarily release it right at that facility where it could be in danger again. So this gives a little bit of leeway there. In section 9, denial, suspension, or revocation of an eagle permit. The department is proposing under the second bullet there, failed to provide or maintain the housing and or care for a golden eagle as required. This is a proposed recommended addition from the department that I don't believe is in the support material. We realized that we needed to have that or there. And then the rest of this is conforming languages that will take the regulation and make it consistent with the rest of the NAC. Most of this you have already seen in the first workshop. But on page 12, under NAC 503.205.6.B1, which is a lot of letters and numbers, possess feathers for each species of a raptor he or she lawfully possesses or has possessed. And previously, we had proposed language that for eagles themselves, and we're proposing now to remove that, again, based on discussions at that workshop and feedback from master falconers who stated that they would like to have additional feathers for imping purposes. It gives them more flexibility in their birds. There's no other changes on page 19 and 20 that you haven't seen before. And similarly with page 20 and 22, or 23 and 24. And with that, those are all the changes and the language, and we can go back to anything or answer any questions if any of that was unclear.
Any questions for Ms. Newmark?
Just
Commissioner
one
Keel.
clarifying question. Yeah, Ms. Newmark, so all the edits would have been as presented with the one in section 9, which wasn't in the support material.
Correct. Do I still have my presentation up? Yeah,
I just
let me
wanted to
go
make sure
back
that you
to-
said that was the only one.
So, yes, so the and/or there, that was an addition that was not in the support material. And additionally, the one that, and I'm sorry for backing up like this is really annoying. Additionally, this section 3.1 under stipulations, while in possession of a golden eagle, must possess a copy of a valid hunting license, master falconry license, etc.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Commissioner Wise.
I believe also the word physical under section 4, part B.
Good catch, thank you.
And then I just want to say that I just felt like this was really well worked. I think we got a lot of really good feedback from people who do this work, and the department obviously took all of that to heart. And I remember our discussion last time, and it's really refreshing to come to this place and feel good about what is here. So.
Additional questions or comments? All right, I'll take it out for cab comment in Clark County. None. Any cab comment on Zoom? None. Any public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing none. Any public comment on Zoom? All right, with that, I'll bring it back to the commission. Commissioner McNinch.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll make a motion to approve Commission General Regulation 506, possession of golden eagles under certain circumstances, with the noted revisions from today's meeting and as presented.
Or I guess you'll forward it for adoption. It's a workshop. correct?
Sorry, forward for adoption, yeah, I didn't even need to do anything today. My apologies, yes,
No
that's right.
problem. Okay. Got a motion by Commissioner McNinch, seconded by Vice Chair Rogers. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Agenda item number 9, public comment period. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes. No action can be taken by the commission at this time. Any item requiring commission action may be scheduled on a future commission agenda. Any public comment in Las Vegas? Seeing none. Any public comment on Zoom? Okay, seeing none. Agenda item number 10, field trip, Gemini Solar Project. Tour will begin at the close of agenda item number 9. The commission will tour a large-scale solar facility outside of Las Vegas, and time allowing, an established solar energy zone in the vicinity. An informational discussion on novel approaches to energy development and wildlife habitat will accompany. No action will be taken by the commission. The public is invited to participate, but will be required to provide their own transportation. The group will depart from the meeting location. Alan.
For the record, Alan Janae. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna wrap up this meeting here. We'll go outside. We have a number of NDOW vehicles that we can put people into, but we'll go out. If you remember back to last year, Tonopah's meeting, we were out looking at a footprint of what was proposed for a solar facility. This one is one that is under construction, and we'll be able to talk about some of the differences between them. But as far as the specifics, we have Jasmine Kleiber, who is our Habitat staff specialist, and she's gonna give us a little bit more of an overview, and then we'll head outside and get underway.
Thank you, Jasmine Kleiber, Wildlife Staff Specialist in the Habitat Division, for the record. On the way out the door, I would like to point out, we do have a handout that I'd like you guys to grab. It's just a single page. There's a map on the back side of it that shows where we're actually going to be meeting. It's about 30 miles northeast of Las Vegas. We're gonna hop on the I-15 and we'll take a turn, get off the exit there at the Valley of Fire Highway. And we're gonna stop and grab a quick bite there at the Moapa Paiute Travel Center. They've got a little restaurant. You can get some sandwiches and whatnot, snacks, drinks. It's right across the street from where we will be meeting folks from Permenergy, who are the developers of the solar facility there at Gemini. What we're going to be looking for when we head out there, as we drive out, we're actually going to be passing through some solar energy zones, including the Dry Lake Solar Energy Zone. We'll talk about that when we're on site too, and it feeds into the process that BLM is working through right now, revisiting the Western Solar Plan. Through that solar plan, they're proposing to add 5 additional states, where we previously had 6 of the southwestern states. We're now adding on the Pacific Northwest, Idaho, Montana, or they're proposing to add those states to the plan. But through the plans, they developed or identified solar energy zones, which were supposed to be areas where solar could be sited and have low impacts for natural resources, cultural resources, other key resources. And so we'll be driving by one of the current existing solar energy zones on our way out to Gemini Solar. Gemini Solar itself is not located in one of those solar energy zones, and we'll talk about that a little bit too while we're out there. Unfortunately, right now we will be pulling off on the side of the road on Valley of Fire Highway to view the solar facility because they are currently in construction and are not able to allow us on site at this point in time. So with that, we're happy to have additional discussions, questions. We're going to have 2 folks from BLM who will be present with us to help answer questions on processes of planning and permitting, and then we will have folks from Permenergy as well as our own wildlife staff to help walk through the process and what makes this project special and some of the key differences in how this project was planned and is being implemented as compared to more traditional methods like what we discussed when we were in Tonopah. So if there are any questions prior to our departure, I would recommend that we get on the road, and I can answer questions on the way or when we get there, unless there's anything pressing right now.
Now let's head out.
Okay, thank you.
Recordings.